Gotta be here.
I think we have a quorum of the board, and we said if you wanted to continue that discussion a bit, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah.
Yes. That for the audience, in case you're new, this was a discussion about possible federal waivers and some of the plans that we're making to possibly submit an application in November, and if not, February.
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
I want to make sure that I've correctly understood this. The principles are those things that the Fed, the DOE, has said, here's the criteria you must use to judge your waivers by. And these waiver of ESEA requirements are the department's recommendation of those things that we should consider. I'm sorry. Is that correct?
Sally, you want to come in?
Yeah, I did the last part. I'll speak loud.
Sally went to the training, so I'm going to let her, along with Mike and Linda and Joseph.
Okay.
You mean on the document Sally gave you?
Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. The principles for improving academic achievement and increasing quality of instruction, those 4 items are from the DOE.
Yes.
Those are their criteria that we should be judging whatever waivers we submit should fit somehow into these 4 criteria. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have to respond
Right.
to each of the 4, right.
Okay.
So they don't call them criteria, they're calling them principles, so we have to have a plan for how to
I
respond.
understand that. I'm calling them criteria because I want to make sure I'm understanding that this is what their
This is what we have to
smell
do.
test, that they want to have everything.
So
Okay.
we have to do those principles in order to get the
And-
10 or 11 waivers.
And these 10 or 11 waivers that we're recommending, we believe fit all of these
There's no,
boxes.
they don't give you a choice of picking which waivers.
No, I'm just
Except for
saying
the
that
11th one.
somewhere of these 11 waivers, they fit in one of these or more.
Yeah, it's a little bizarre how they did it. Took me a while to figure out, okay, so I'm going to get waivers for 10 to 11 requirements and No Child Left Behind by doing 3 principles that really are from Race to the Top. So it's almost like how they can superimpose Race to the Top over
Okay, that's
No
where I
Child
was
Left
having
Behind.
a difficult time,
Yeah.
was trying to see where the connection was between No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top. I wasn't quite sure. Is this kind of a plan, you think, for reauthorization, or?
I think it may be their plan.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah. All right.
I mean,
And so
and
then, the state education agencies, the local education agencies are also part of their requirements, that they both have to be addressed?
Where are you looking at right now?
Well, I just see within a waiver of ESEA requirements, there's several of them that talk about local education agencies, and several talk about state education agencies.
Mhm.
Is this because that's required by them to have both of those addressed?
Well, some of the things that they're waiving are an LEA issue, and some of the waivers
Right.
are at a state issue. So
Right.
if you look at number 2, for example, the local districts have to identify for improvement, corrective action, or restructuring any of their own Title I schools. So that would say to the LEA, you don't have to implement those turnaround models with those schools.
Okay.
For us on number 3, we are supposed to be identifying local district at the district level, districts that aren't making AYP, and then putting them under corrective action. This gives us the ability that we do not have to put them under that corrective action.
All right.
Does that help?
It does. I guess I'm trying to figure out the right way to ask this. Under their requirements, their required fields that you have to address, do they want you to identify clearly what is a local district's responsibility versus what a state responsibility is, or is this just some of the things we have addressed in those ways?
These are right out of No Child Left Behind.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I...
Yeah. So when it says LEA, it is at the local level, so.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry to
Yeah.
make this longer than it
Well,
was.
but look at 7, Nancy, that it gives us the flexibility that we can provide financial rewards to a reward school. That's one of the ones that we're thinking we're going to use for our top-to-bottom list. I'm sorry, our beating the odds list. But number 8 is specifically for the local districts, because if the local districts have not met their highly qualified status, they have to do a corrective action plan. This says you don't have to do a corrective action plan. And
the
part of
reason-
that is because they're going to move away from highly qualified into highly effective.
And how do you think those two things differ? Is it
Highly qualified is based more on
Inputs.
The number of credits that you've had?
credentials and,
the
credentials.
credits
and
you've had.
Licensing,
Yeah, right,
credentials.
okay. Okay, just
Which
want
is-
to make sure. I was hoping that was the way we were going. Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. That helps tremendously. Thank you very much.
Okay?
Yeah.
We're good? Thank you. And we'll find a mechanism to see that we're all comfortable with either meeting November 11th or November 14th or not. And if we're not, either way, we'll make sure the board is comfortable with us, or we won't proceed at that date. Mary Ann?
Is that lawsuit still a concern, against my
Accreditation?
Until the legislature takes action, we're not certain of what I'm ready to say, but we will have fulfilled all that was requested of us by the judge. The only things left is so we did all the other stuff that needed to be done.
Okay.
So we would think that the injunction would be lifted if we got the two approvals.
Can we get an update on that sometime?
Mary Ann, I can't hear you.
I was asking about the lawsuit against the MySAS.
Oh.
And Mike said we've already done a number of things the judge asked, and I was just asking if
Yeah.
we could get an update.
Why don't we,
on
we'll give you a paragraph on the things that we addressed. I mean,
Okay.
one was go back on hearings, which we did. There's a couple like that. So we'll do that. We'll send that to
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
And that's why we're, confident as we can be. The judicial system is independent, but we think that we will have satisfied that. And thanks for bringing that up. I mean, that's, for the audience and others, that's the connection between also the November date, and whether it's wise to do that. I'll just say this. I've said to our team that we can only do what we can do, and I think if others have been responsible for some of their actions without me attributing value one way or the other to it, I could picture someone concerned about the accreditation issue, which they're entitled to. They also, as a result, may have issues related to whether we get the waiver or not. People have to accept responsibility for that.
So one supersedes the other?
No, it's just that one could cost us that.
Oh,
So
I
if
see.
not getting the accreditation cost us waivers, I think that's for others to speak to. They're going to do the best we can. We're going to try to get the accreditation system done as approved by the board.
Okay.
We're then going to try to do waivers, but as I said, I think the biggest issue with Arnie that is outside of some of what's so specific in here is are we, I'm using his words, but are we in effect telling the truth? And his view is we're not if we say all schools are accredited, and there isn't one unaccredited school with what he knows to be the issues here. So that might be something tough for us to overcome. But our guys have a lot to do, and I just said we'll just do the best we can. We'll do the best we can on a waiver, and if we can get it for the field, that would be great. Selfishly, I think it's good for the system, and I think it's good for the locals, but we can only do what we can do, and if somehow it doesn't measure up, then so be it. But I also think it's to preserve our relationship. That's one reason, I would rather be at a point where you're comfortable with what we're going to do, even if it's not required, and even if it's not as timely as we might have hoped. That's important to do here, so we're going to do that. And Paul, do you want to, we'll just get back on track if you want, because we've got a few minutes till public participation anyway. I don't know if you wanted to we kind of cut you off with lunch, but if you wanted to complete, or not complete, if you wanted to give your report as
Sure.
Michigan Teacher of the Year.
I'd be happy to. Thank you. I just want to highlight a few things that obviously were in the written report. As we continue looking at providing opportunities for students across the state of Michigan, we continue to still have conversation with regard to entrepreneurship and the endeavors that we're looking at and what it is that we're trying to do and make available for our students. And so I have continuing conversation with Patty Cantu and CTE department as we look at what some of those options might look like. We're going through a current review and standards for marketing, sales, and entrepreneurship. So some of those things change as we are utilizing and what the standards are that need to be taught and what segments they fall in to meet the requirements for our students. So that touches a little bit on our continued movement with the entrepreneurship topic. I had a wonderful opportunity to attend the Digital Educator Leadership Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the first part of October. Unfortunately, it rained most of the time we were there, and they don't tend to get a lot of that rain. They were very thankful for it, but I did get a chance. They have the hot air balloons. That's a big, huge festival. So I was able to get out onto the field there and see the shapes, if you will, which were very cool. But that wasn't the focus of the meeting. The meeting really dealt with the fact of, you know, a lot of the chief information officers from very large schools and various states were present, and they looked at a lot of different topics. And one of the topics that really was engaging for me is when they were talking about the alternative classroom and utilizing technology, different teaching methods, different strategies to reach a wide population of students academically and maybe some of those that are facing some challenges. But a lot of what they're looking at doing is project-based learning. Looking at the idea of some of the materials delivered online, and then we can spend more time hands-on when we're interacting with our instructor and doing that. A great debate was on grades versus non-grades and competencies. And I really enjoyed that because career and technical education is all about competencies and working with those, and so it really was a great fit for that. There was a gentleman that had a very good point when he dealt with, this is great that we're looking at all these different options, but, you know, teachers inspire and students work well with others. How do we deal with those soft skills? You know, if all of this stuff may be moving away from a traditional, you know, you've got to come for so many hours and be involved in the classroom and that. And so that was a concern in the discussion. And again, I'll parallel it to what we do in career and technical education. We grade our students on those areas. That's a portion of their grade. So when we look at that, I think a lot of the alternative classroom and what K-12 is looking to do to meet the standards fits into those models and some things that have been and continue to be available, you know, through Career Tech Ed. So I was very pleased to be there. And on another note, I was the only classroom instructor, classroom teacher that was there. And so it was very important for me to hear what's happening at the higher levels, the issues that they're grappling with, you know, online assessments and how do we do these and work with all of these things, but yet also be able to offer my perspective of what is happening there. So I was really pleased to have an opportunity to work with that. On our campus, one thing I'd like to, last night I had the great opportunity, my BMMT team, my business management, marketing, and technology colleagues, we presented to our Board of Ed. And so at the CTE campus, we take a look at our report was on student achievement. And I just want to share with you what we shared with our Oakland Schools Board of Education and things being data-driven. What you see here in front of you, part of what we do, particularly in BMMT, is prepare students with national certification, of course, to get them college and career ready. And the numbers you can see there, a 3-year window of what we've done on a county-wide basis from 08-09 through 2010, and you can see it's obviously in a very powerful growth model and mode. And when you look behind the numbers, what do these national certifications mean? These are industry benchmarks. These are what our business partners are saying that we need to do. This is not a test that Paul Galbinski makes up and we give it to him and it's a teacher situation, although we do that within the day-to-day of the classrooms. These are national certifications that business and industry have put forth. So, for example, we talk about the whole Microsoft suite there. You know, we look at the different certifications that are there, A+ and Network+, and there's just a variety of them to go into. But I just want to give an example. We had a young man at one of the campuses pass very high-level certifications, enough so he could have went and gone right into the workforce and had a family wage earning position to do very well for himself. He chose to go to the University of Michigan. And the University of Michigan obviously recognized the rigor that's behind these national certifications, particularly in the IT area, information technology. that they granted this young man 12 college credits at the University of Michigan because he's been able to earn these. And so I think, again, this is a trend we need to take a look at and do, and we are doing this in Career and Tech Ed. But more importantly, then, he went on and got a job within the IT department at the University of Michigan, and then that parlayed into an internship with Google. So you can just see what is being able to happen at the campuses for our students, and that's just an example of what not only the numbers are, but more importantly, what it really means when you get down to it, how it's impacting students from a student achievement standpoint. The other area we take a look at, we've talked a lot about the different colleges and college credits that are earned. Since 2000, we've had successful, over 1,000 college credits have been earned by our high school students through the programming that we're offering just in the business management, marketing, and technology. That's just the program that I work in. That's not all of the other areas. We have an entrepreneurship program that we started several years ago, and on average, we have 133 credits per year that are earned. And the way that that's set up, it's with a local community college. They're able to earn 12 direct college credits while taking and getting that online experience that's required, and then those are direct that they can take portable if they're going to move on in whatever college or university that they're going to attend. And then we just entered in, and this is our first year as a pilot and up and running with Northwood. Northwood University, we have an opportunity where our students then can earn 12 college credits, full semester, and there's some other added pieces to it where they might almost have a full year of college underway and under their belt by the time they leave. So when we're really focusing on student achievement, those are some of the areas. So the last piece I just want to share with you on student achievement. Several years ago, we are working with, and within career and technical education, we're really starting to see that blend of what we need to do with the technical skills and the academic skills. And we're offering these at the campuses. So those numbers that you see, again, a 3-year trend of what we're able to do, and obviously last year's class was the first having to meet the requirements to everybody have 12th grade English, everybody have Algebra 2, and so those numbers are reflective in these academic credits earned. We have students at our campuses that come and get 12th grade English. They're able to come and attend and get their required Algebra 2, and in my particular program, we offer 4th math with all of the things that we're doing from the business side and the IT. So that is, again, always the numbers reflected there in the academic credits earned. So I thought it would be a good idea to share with you. I shared this numbers and this information with our board last night because my charge and our charge as a cluster, as we're well known, was to say, what are we doing now? We have all these programs in place. What's the student achievement? What does this look like? What are our students benefiting from? And so that was certainly what we did last night, and so I wanted to share that with you today as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Just a couple other items. I know you saw in the report there, we hosted a very successful community service project. This is another hat that I wear on the basketball world, is work with athletics. And it was noted in there that we were able to raise some dollars and donate it to Coaches versus Cancer. And so that's just a real positive approach when you're able to give professional development for coaches and mentors and leaders in that area, and also raise some dollars for a good cause. And then the last thing, as my role as Michigan Teacher of the Year, I had a wonderful opportunity to deliver a keynote address for the 2011 CTE Teacher Academy that was held here in Lansing. That was Monday or so ago, and we had over 100 educators that were there. It was great. I mentioned before dealing with revisions and aligning and putting them in segments. That was the charge of that conference that we had there, and it was just great to be in the presence of and learn from all of those teachers that are in that area of the educational system, if you will, and had an opportunity, and it's now led to obvious other opportunities for me to be at some conferences and do some presenting. So it's been a busy month. It's been a great month, and I'm always happy to be able to share and report out what's happening there at the campuses and through the state. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Perfect.
By the way, also thank you for using your pulpit to really help the system understand what we kind of knew here a few years ago, but is easier said than done, and that is to infuse the academic credit into the CTE pathway. I think there's still some help that folks need to model the way you're doing it, because that's the real goal. Kids can get out of a CTE experience and still get academic credit and not have that kind of conflict of time. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mertz, we're at public participation, and thank you for our guests for taking the time to be here today, and you'll hear the protocols now.
And do I have any more forms out there? I'll come back in a second to double check that, so if you want to, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, the first speaker today is John Love. If you would approach the table, Mr. Love, I will remind everybody that you will have 5 minutes to speak. If you sit at the end of the table, you can watch the timer here. If you have handouts, if you'd give them to either Eileen or Paul at the end of the table, they can just pass them around the table. Thank you. We're ready whenever you are, Mr. Love.
Thank you. At the last meeting, I talked about standardized accounting systems, and I apologize for not making it a little clearer. I didn't mean that the accounting system that interfaced with the State Board of Education. I meant the operating systems that they use in their own schools. Because when you have Grand Blanc School, you have Holly schools, you have Fenton schools. If they don't have that same operating financial system, it's very difficult for them to share how much does it cost for your buses, how much does you spend in purchasing, because these systems are all different. And with 750 school districts, you can see it's a monumental task to start this effort of sharing information and working together to drive down costs. Today, it's back to school. So I have a grade here and a report card. And I've got the good news and the bad news. The good news is the this Michigan test scores, the Detroit schools, and the dashboard, and Senate Bill 331 that reduces the liquor store taxes. On the test scores, well, the good point is that you've standardized them to be equivalent to college admissions. The bad news is that you take the test in October and you don't get the results until March. That doesn't make sense, because that way you can't react to the system. And this Northwestern Educational Association system, they have a standardized system, and in Grosse Pointe schools, they give that test 3 times a year. The beginning of the school, the middle of the school, and at the end of the school, so that they can have a way of monitoring the kids' progress and reacting to it. The Detroit public school system. Oh, they're going to work on it next year. No, they should be working on it this year. And there's no State Board of Education involvement. This new board is outside of the authorization of the Constitution. And, you know, where's the money coming from? And on top of that, if they were really interested in the kids, they'd empty that Fisher Building office complex and move into one of these schools that they spent $1.5 billion refurbishing and be down there in the combat zone. The dashboard, well, we got the dashboard. It's a little complex, and I see the governor made his in a similar fashion, except he dropped off the ranking. He used to rank these categories. Now there's no ranking on them, and the Board of Education doesn't have any ranking either. So that's an opportunity to improve. This legislative process in Michigan, this is really incredible. Because what you have here is, I passed them out and gave them to you. That's the ranking of the people that voted to repeal the liquor store tax, $14 million. And the thing that's interesting about it is there were 29 people that voted no. Those are the good guys. The rest of them voted to cancel the liquor store tax, $14 million. That's money that could have been used for schools, for dropout programs, for consolidation, for improving the system. So the sacrifices they decided to do is to make sure that the people in Michigan sacrifice, but the liquor stores get a pass. And the people that voted no are the heroes, 29 of them. There were 4 Republicans that voted no. The rest were Democrats. A third of them were members of the Black Caucus, and 2 of them were members of the State Board of Education, former members. So that's the list of the good guys that are out there working to make this a better state. The rest of them are an embarrassment. The beer tax is another opportunity right there. Frozen for 50 years. That's a disgrace. That's the power of the liquor lobby that's running this state, not the education lobby. You're just an afterthought. The beer guys are going to get the cash. That's a disgrace. So that's where we're at. We'll wrap it up with the Constitution. Duties. Public education. The Detroit school system's running their own operation. The universities, there's 13 universities in the Constitution. They turn in 15 budgets. And advising the legislature on money. I haven't seen any advice on money from the State Board of Education. You need to do your duty that's in the Constitution. And on top of that, there's 10 members on the board, and only 9 of them are on the attendance figures for the State Board of Education minutes. The missing one is the governor, and that's a constitutional member of the board. So you need to put him on the list. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. I hope you raise your grades.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second speaker is Debbie Rude.
Just as an aside, we'll have the MEP scores back to the buildings by mid-December, the way we did last year. And whether schools themselves decide to give it to their teachers or not, we always encourage them to do so. But we'll do just what we did last year, and we'll get them to them by mid-December.
Okay, we're ready whenever you are. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I do have some handouts that are going around the table now, and I only have 4 of these. These are a national report on what Parents for Public Schools nationally is doing across the country, in a growing number of chapters of which I represent the First of Michigan, in Michigan. My name is Debbie Rude, and I'm Executive Director of Parents for Public Schools of Greater Kalamazoo, Incorporated, a local and regional chapter of a national organization, Parents for Public Schools. Parents for Public Schools of Greater Kalamazoo represents nearly 37,000 public school children and their families in 9 area school districts. These districts represent a wide range of socio-demographics, including urban, rural, and suburban districts. I'm here today to address a recent decision by the Michigan Department of Education to waiver out of No Child Left Behind and pending legislation in the state Senate surrounding school of choice, an expansion of public school charters, State Senate Bills 418 through 425. We would like to describe to you today what we believe to be a perfect storm looming for public school parents if one is left unchecked and the other fails. Allow me to illustrate this convergence. We have a middle school listed as pervasively failing and currently in year 2 of a turnaround mode, due in part to the accountability measures set in place by No Child Left Behind. The school has been awarded nearly $4 million in a school improvement grant over the next 3 years to drive improvement in 5 key areas of student achievement. This plan is both comprehensive and ambitious, for achievement targets were set when the state accepted a 33% passing rate for proficiency. The state, as you know, has now elevated proficiency scores to 66%, a good and positive sign in the right direction, but still a D in most classrooms today. This school suffers from high student absenteeism, achievement gaps both racially and by gender, and has identified behavioral interventions for students and professional development for its teaching staff, priority 1, as part of its turnaround plan. Thanks to No Child Left Behind, we know this about this school. As parents, we should know this about this school. We should be left to make a value decision for our children based in part by these data points and not by an arbitrary boundary line, a zip code, or a desire to maintain student counts in underperforming districts. Parents for Public Schools would ask, why can't our neighborhood schools be the first choice for students and families? And what do we need to do to partner with and move public schools forward? We should be the ones making the decision to stay or leave to a higher performing public or public charter school for our children if our neighborhood public schools fail to meet minimum performance objectives. The cohort of students and families affected by our collective failure to meet these minimum standards year after year, and the transparency and information sharing with parents to assist in making these choices, seems unrepresented in recent policy decisions. If Senate Bills 418 through 425 do not pass, parents, particularly parents living in poverty, will be powerless to do anything about moving their child out of a pervasively failing school, and less engaged in its success over time. Where is the parent voice in all of these decisions? Who are you hearing from, and what is the rush? Since No Child Left Behind, the Michigan Department of Education has made significant progress around data management, training, and access for local ISDs and districts. The new dashboard is a tool we welcome and use to help train parents navigate the performance metrics of schools. However, this decision to waiver out seems more like a step backwards for parents and for reform advocates. Parents want to know what it is we value here in Lansing and how will success be measured and communicated if the waiver is granted. How will we know if our public schools are meeting educational goals and their obligations to Michigan students, families, and communities? How confident are we in our ability to drive compliance and continuous improvement at the local level? Have you measured what parents value in their public education system to have a balanced perspective? What if these plans fail? Parents will be left accountable for a choice that was never theirs to begin with. So we ask this body and its supportive agencies two things. First and foremost, consider rescinding the waiver request, and if unable or unwilling to do so, continue a path of rigorous and intentional transparency that includes meaningful and systemic parent and family engagement. Parents can and should be a valued voice in the decision-making process, not a communication portal once the decisions have been made. Where we have highly engaged parents, we have high-performing schools. Finally, in the event the waiver holds, we ask this board to consider support of Senate Bills 418, 425, and really support the parents' right to choose a public better school option for their children.
Thank you. Some of that's under consideration today, I think, as a matter of fact.
Are you sure those are the numbers?
They are.
I think it's 618.
I'm sorry, 618,
Okay.
625.
I thought there was a bunch of bills I didn't know about.
There probably are, but, you know.
But not on that particular subject.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next speaker is Sean Kotke.
Good afternoon. I guess I can be heard, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you. I represent the Robert B. Miller College, where I serve as the Dean of the School of Education. And I would like to commend the Michigan Department of Education, this board, and the superintendent for removing the proposal for adoption today of the INTASC, that's the Interstate Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium Standards, at this time from the agenda, and by soliciting input from teacher preparation institutions. My intent is not to discredit the INTASC standards by any means, but rather to urge continued thoughtful, critical, and collegial conversations between multiple stakeholders on what standards change means for Michigan schools. In October 2009, my institution's application for probationary approval as a teacher preparation institution was approved by this board, or at least most of this board, of those who were on here at the time. And board members offered praise for our adherence to the standards that have been in place. Our program's quality depends on solid, high standards. We work with the professional standards for Michigan teachers, the elementary education standards, our specialty program endorsement standards, and our national accreditation standards. Because of this commitment to rigorous standards, Michigan has become the envy of the nation for teacher preparation, despite what you might see in the media regarding the reports about Michigan teachers. I can attest to this firsthand from my own experience as a teacher, coming through Eastern Michigan's teacher education program and being recruited by out-of-state schools, and firsthand through my work as a teacher educator, seeing our own candidates being recruited heavily by out-of-state school districts. And when they leave the state, they become leaders and perform at or above the level of the teachers prepared in the other states. luckily, they come back and are leaders here. This is one of our state's most endurable assets. While our standards should be continually reviewed, revised, and reinvigorated to reflect changing realities, we must do so mindfully and with the active participation of all stakeholders, public and private, in the enterprise of teacher preparation, and not cheapen this endurable asset through hasty action. In conclusion, I applaud the Michigan Department of Ed and the State Board of Education for rescinding, at this point, the adoption wholesale of these standards, and I do look forward to collaborations with my colleagues in higher education and at the Michigan Department of Education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Copeland. And she is coming to the table with Barb Shemansky.
Kind of heavy. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Academically cool. What happened?
The folder on
My
the...
folder? Academically cool is what I encouraged and supported students to be in Grand Rapids in 1987 when I started a program called BEAT, the Black Educational Excellence Program. Academically cool equal academically successful college students and career learners. I'm here to inform you and to seek your assistance in empowering our parents to become our children's educational saviors. I am Mary Copeland. I am founder and president of PAN, Parents Empowering Network, and I appreciate this opportunity to share with you a program called My Home is a VIPS Home. That stands for My Home is a Home that values, instills, promotes, and supports education. Dr. Ronald Ferguson, a Harvard professor, spoke recently in Grand Rapids about the need for innovation in social movement work if we hope to improve our schools and to change our children's educational outcomes. My Home is a VIPS program. It's very innovative. It will engage parents in a dialogue. We will define each term. We will list the components of that term. We will ask parents to identify those components in their home. And if they do not have those components, we will ask them to consider implementing those. At the end of a 4-hour session, parents will be given a $60 stipend, and they will be given a window logo that says, My Home is a VIPS home. The expectation is that those kids who come from those homes are to be healthy, civilized, moralized, humanized, well-fed, well-rested, and understand that adults are in charge. My Home is a VIPS home is designed to create communities where parents and families share a universal understanding of the importance of education for their children and our community. My Home is a VIPS home is positioned to implement social work movement by elevating parents to their rightful status as their child's first and most influential teacher, by educating them to the power, the transformative power of an education, by educating them in their role as their child's instiller, believer, and enforcer of education, in equipping them with the knowledge they need to make a difference, with the skills they need to make a difference, and the desire to make a difference. Creating an environment that values and supports education must be a family affair first, a community affair second, and then a nation. Parents and other adults must reawaken the earnest desire for learning. we must mobilize entire communities to understand the urgency to improve our children's educational success. In today's world, second only to a parent's unconditional love for their children, I believe in education is the greatest endowment that can be bequeathed to them. In the words of Thomas Friedman, I think we need a revolution in this country when it comes to parenting around education. Ladies and gentlemen, I implore you to give serious consideration to encouraging Michigan school districts to fund and to contract with Penn to establish My Home as a VIPS home. What better place than the state's capital to champion a parenting empowerment revolution, to empower parents to become their children's educational savior and their own Superman. If we understand that our children's future and our destiny are one, we must act innovatively and socially now. Thank yours and thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Szymanski?
Mary asked me, do you want to go to Lansing? And I said, do you mean I can speak to somebody who can maybe make a difference? And she said, maybe. And I said, I'd love to. So I'm here to support Mary in this wonderful project. She is trying to start in Grand Rapids, hopefully through all the state of Michigan. I'm a firm believer. First of all, my name is Barbara Szymanski. I'm a retired school teacher. I have taught both in public and private schools over 30 years. And I always say the best teacher is the parent. Everything has to come from that very, very beginning. If you have a loving parent, a parent that has values, gives the child values, if that parent is helping that child learn, by the time they come to school, they can be educated. And as an early educator, I was in first, second, third, and fourth grade. I want to say just something that's probably very, very basic to most of you here, but something I think that needs to be said and thought about is that Mary once said, why are we losing our children at fourth grade level? And I said, I think I know the reason is because by the time they get to fourth grade level, they are not able to read. The first 4 years you learn how to read, and then once you get to fourth grade, you are reading to learn. And if they aren't ready to read to learn at that fourth grade level, we've lost them. So we have to start right back in kindergarten. I think our first grade has slipped back to kindergarten. We don't really have, our kindergarten is almost like a first grade now. So those first 4 years, you've got to be able to really have children become readers. And back in the 60s, when I first started teaching, those grades had probably that reading, writing, and arithmetic. Actually, it was reading, writing, and math. We changed that word years ago. We would read with our children twice a day. Now, my first graders, when I left a few years ago, they had science, social studies, computer, Spanish, art, music. Hardly time for me. Sometimes recess is good. When do you get that reading in? 2 or 3 times a day. My teaching partner and I were changing our social studies and science to a reading program because we've got to have these children become readers. They have to have those skills in kindergarten. If they don't learn those skills in kindergarten, they should not go on to first. If they don't have those skills of the first grade reader, they should not go on to second, because if you start piling those skills onto a child who does not know the ones before, you've lost them. So by fourth grade, your child is lost unless they are a good reader. You can do nothing in school unless you're able to read. You can't even do math in school unless you become a good reader. And it starts way back at the beginning of home when those children are first put in somebody's arms. And I think we can make our children fly by fourth grade if we really pay attention to what's happening way back.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I take one of these?
Our next speaker,
Does everybody have?
our next speaker is Kathy Tillett.
Good afternoon, I'm Kathy Tillett, and I give honor to all the board members, guests, and visitors in the building. First of all, I would like to thank Superintendent Flanagan. Some years ago, I called the Board of Ed, and I said, I just have something I need to discuss with Dr. Flanagan. And the secretary said, and what organization are you from? And I said, oops. Well, today I am representing 3 organizations. I'm representing the 21st Century Optimist Club, and we are bringing out the best in children, and we're international. I'm representing the Minerva Incorporated, we are Achievement, and we're national. And I'm representing Image Prep, and we work with charter schools and homeschools. And I certainly would like to thank Michigan for my background in education. Now, the thing I really want to, what I'm talking about, give honors to our director also from the Michigan After School Partnership. That we need, and it's interesting coming right behind the 2 groups who talked about children and education. As you very well know, we need collaborators. And I picked up names and a guide of collaborators that our group can work with to educate our children. We really have to meet the challenge of having our American children being up to par with the world, with the workforce, with the world. And with the after-school program, when we were talking about the courses that the kids no longer have, and the STEM program that we need desperately so that our children can get jobs, and as we see now with the after-school program, we have too many kids out in the streets instead of being in something practical to upgrade our workforce. We have, I would say, approximately 100 individuals working within our 3 core programs, and we will work with more, each one teach one. When we leave the department, and I must say, I was walking with Mary up here, and I was saying, well, back in 1967, and I said this to this group before, we were on the top. We want to get there again, and we can do it. We have talent here in Michigan. And no matter how much we get discouraged, because I know at the time, sometimes the State Board of Education and the officers here feel, I'm just doing the best I can, and, we're still not getting there. But we are getting there if we keep on trying. So I know that I'm preaching to the choir, because I know you already support the after-school programs, because we work together with the traditional, the cyber, and the after-school. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Our next speaker is Mary White. While she's getting ready, are there any more forms? Ready when you are.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mary T. Wood. I live at 27533 Santa Ana in Warren, Michigan. And I'm here to address the board in regards to information that is very concerning to me in regards to the operations of our charter schools here in Michigan. I passed out to you a copy of information that I researched out and compiled on this one page in regards to one of our largest management companies with charter schools, National Heritage Academies, with J.C. Huizenga as the founder of the company. You'll see I stated across the top that Mr. Huizenga has had a close relationship with Grand Valley State over the years. This is current information as of the last 5 years, so I'm not sure as to when his relationship with Grand Valley actually started, but he is under their oversight of many of his charter schools right now, and he does have this relationship ongoing with them. As you can see, he is one of the directors on the Grand Valley State University Foundation. He provides a $35,000 yearly scholarship to students of the Sedman College of Business. He is a member of the Sedman College of Business Dean's Advisory Board, and he's listed on the 2009 annual report on giving as a member of a Lifetime Giving President's Council for the $1 million plus donation. He is also an annual donor of $25,000. In November of 2007, an interview with the Sedman College of Business newsletter stated that Huizenga he expressed his involvement with public education. He referenced the assertions of Nobel laureate Milton Friedman back in the 70s that public education could only improve if it was privatized. Only through privatization can competition be introduced, and with competition, quality rises and prices, costs fall. In the early 1990s, he partnered with Paul DeWeese, who created Teach Michigan, to change the law, and they succeeded in creating the charter school statute. J.C. Huizenga opened one of his first charter schools in 1995, the Excel Academy in Grand Rapids, under Grand Valley State University. Now his company, National Heritage, operates 70 schools across the U.S., with close to 50 of them being in Michigan. Many of these aren't being authorized by Grand Valley. The close relationship between National Heritage and J.C. Huizenga and Grand Valley State University is a conflict of interest. He is indeed the applicant for these schools. Are these schools really public? Yes, they are open for every child, and they are funded with public dollars. But the National Heritage staff handpicks the public boards to whom they will be accountable to. Then Grand Valley State appoints them. These people are to sit on the public board, but this is a conflict of interest and totally invalidates any integrity of this school being public. National Heritage would not negotiate any terms with the board. When this has been attempted by some academy boards, they were removed by Grand Valley State University. And I've also listed his donation contributions to the Republican Party there. I'm a little unnerved right now because in the process of just getting my FOIA request that was delayed because the department was requesting me to send them $1.42 before they would send me the 8 pages that I had asked when I was here last month to review documents. I detained it and waited till I could come to save the buck postage. But I have here one of National Heritage schools and a relationship with Grand Valley and correspondence with their board. I'm very disturbed. I mean, I'm actually nauseated. The board wanted to renegotiate their contract and their lease with National Heritage, and they refused to do so, and they approached Grand Valley about this. This is Grand Valley's response to the board. My position regarding reauthorization is that evaluative measures we would use to evaluate the school's performance would cease to exist if the board were not to employ National Heritage Academy. NHA employs the faculty and administration. NHA owns the building, curriculum, and the equipment. If NHA were replaced as a management company, these components would cease to exist. The students would be forced to attend another school other than this charter school. The metrics used by Grand Valley State would not be available to determine the school's future success, as the only entity still in existence would be the Academy's board. Thus, Grand Valley would not reauthorize this Academy's contract without a stable management agreement, as the historical data we use to evaluate school effectiveness would not be in existence. The school's historical performance would not be an indicator of future success. I'm not quite sure what all that means, to tell you the truth. I'm going to have to really digest that. But when a board member sent in his resignation letter after this again was Grand Valley's response. The contract with Grand Valley expires June 30, 2011. The reluctance of the board to continue their service contract with their historic service provider just months before renewal makes it difficult for Grand Valley to render judgment on the renewal of the contract with the board because of the uncertainty that exists for the Academy absent because of the uncertainty that exists for the academy, absent of its historic service provider. One more paragraph.
Time has expired.
If you would please allow me to just finish. NHA is the holder of the curriculum, physical site, and is employer of all the staff. Thus, these most important components of the school would all be absent as we begin the contract renewal process. Consequently, Grant Valley cannot renew the contract without understanding the curriculum, programming staff, and current site would remain. This is definitely a position where these boards do not have any authority of these public schools. I say, if Grand Valley is the overseer of schools that's been approved for National Heritage Academies, and we have this conflict of interest, the handwriting's on the wall. Where is our oversight of our authorizers? And I do perfectly understand that the law does not give this department any oversight of these authorizers. There's a very serious piece here that needs to be looked at, because this has gone on for way too many times, and I can tell you, I have more than one of these in my files at home, but this is the most current. This contract was renewed only for 1 year instead of what would have been 7 years, based on waiting to see what this board was going to do. And
Mary, your time has expired.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the extra time.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Does that conclude public participation?
It does conclude public participation. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay, we're headed to the discussion action item section of the board meeting. Item L is the approval of fiscal year 11-12 Camp T spending plan. And I think joining at the table will be Carol and Janet. At the September 22nd Michigan School for the Blind Trust Fund Committee meeting, members reviewed the spending plan for Camp T. This item is now being submitted to the entire board for their approval. It was agreed at agenda planning that recommendations on SBE committees to the full board could be presented and approved at the same meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd just like to take a minute to introduce you to Janet Flaherty. I don't think that she's been at the board here before. She is our new director of the Office of Financial Management, actually since January, but we keep her hidden and doing really good work. Just would like the board to get to know Janet a little bit better. She's been instrumental in working not only on this budget, but in everything else that we do financially. Thank you very much.
Janet was with the library when that merger kind of took place, so we were lucky enough to know her credentials firsthand, and we're just delighted when Rick retired to
Mike, they keep telling me there's numbers in the mind. That's what I asked you.
No, we were delighted when Janet agreed to take this position after our merger with libraries. This is when Rick and remember, the entire department retired on January 1. So it's really a credit to Janet and Carol that they've reassembled a great team, but it was frightening. I mean, really, the incentive program, I think, was mixed blessing, to say the least. We lost good people. In this case, it's remarkable to think that an entire department was replaced overnight and is gone without really without us skipping a beat. So thanks, Janet.
I would just like to thank the board for their support of the ongoing work with Camp T. I know that your committee is very active in this. The staff does an awful lot of work to get ready for the committee meetings, and I know that your last meeting, while I wasn't able to attend, went very well. I would also like to recognize Alex Dublentes, who many of you know, but those of you who don't, he's sitting over there, and he's sort of the glue that keeps Camp T going. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it back to you.
Board members from the committee, any comments? This is an action item, but don't know if or a motion, and then discuss. Please.
You want me to make a motion first?
Sure.
I move that we accept the 2011-2012 Camp T budget spending plan.
Support.
I think that's what it said. Oh, I'm sorry.
So it was moved by Cassandra, supported by Nancy, and discussion, please. Richard, then, I'm sorry, probably Cassandra actually did that, but Richard, then Cassandra, then...
How many students, how many weeks?
At the camp
Mm-hmm.
this summer, we had
A really successful summer this year. We had 533 students in total this year, and that's just students, not counting the adults that were with them. We had 19 different reservations that were happening throughout the summer from May 27th through September 9th. So it was a really good turnout this year.
I think Cassandra was next. Kath, would you speak into that? I can't hear. I didn't mean that sarcastically.
Just pull it closer.
Somebody else wasn't Jen, you was? Oh, my gosh. Had a red light, maybe that was working.
Your time is up, yeah.
Is that better? Ham tea says ham tea fajita, which is touch, smell, taste. Yeah. It's land, it's near Greenville, Michigan. And it was purchased for the School for the Blind, actually, many years ago. And it's run now, over the years, quite a few people left money to the trust fund. And the proceeds, the income from those trust funds is supposed to be used to help visually impaired and blind students. And we use the income, and we have a committee that's set up to make sure that the money is invested properly and prudently, and the money is used for, and the income is used largely to support the efforts to give the children of many of them would never have any other way. So we have had trips to Camp T over the years, and I'm sure we'll have another one coming up probably next summer, probably, so that the new board members see what we're talking about. And it really has been very positive experience for kids.
I take it the kids are admitted without cost?
Well, they pay a small tuition. But there are scholarships if they can, but it's to make them, it's really to get them to appreciate that they can come without paying, but really have a fee for those who can.
Okay.
So it's not big. So it's been a wonderful experience, and it's been a difficult thing for us to manage. So it seems to be on sound footing right now.
And if my math is right, it's roughly about $260 per student, which at today's special education rate seems to be quite reasonable.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, I think it is quite reasonable. Okay. Right. So that's a very quick overview, but
helpful. Thank
we'll
you.
look for you to visit the camp at the first opportunity.
Cassandra?
Just a quick question and then a request. The quick question would be, is this in line with the spending from the previous year?
It is. It's actually a lot lower this year. We had some repairs that we wanted to do last year, so the budget last year was $194, although the expenditures came in about $136,000. So we're considerably a lot lower than what we anticipated, but yes, in line.
Okay, great. And in the future, it would be helpful to be able to at least have a little bit of a history, maybe the previous year's spending plan or actual budget.
Okay, cool. Other board?
And this plan was approved by the board committee.
So, and I think our process...
Mary Ann, Eileen, and me.
And I think, I could be wrong on this actually, but I think our process is not only can it be voted on the same day, but that it wouldn't be here if it wasn't moved by the subcommittee. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So, as Kath says, this has been supported by the subcommittee and is asking for board approval. It was moved by Cassandra, did you have something, Eileen? I'm sorry, did you ever
The
have?
only thing I would say is that Camp T is a treasure, and the staff, I want to commend the staff for the work that they've done with this asset, because they're trying to open it up to children who aren't blind so they can understand what's going on. They're trying to work sessions together with blind and seeing kids. And it's just about everything that I would have hoped for. The only thing I'm worried about is that we've got 2 staff members who are not in their 20s doing this work, so we'll want to continue it, even if they disappear to go golfing more than they are now at some point, and I really appreciate it. I'm deaf on one side, and when I see something like this that is successful, I came to deafness late in life, but when I see the possibilities for kids who are mainstreamed, who don't have any relationship to what it means to live with that with a problem, a sight or a hearing problem in a seeing and hearing community. I think it's pretty terrific. So thank you from me.
Great. So it was moved by Cassandra, supported by Nancy. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item is Lisa, the state and federal legislative update. We thought I think, an agenda planning position in here prior to the board's discussion on parent empowerment education reform.
So tempted to take all 3 microphones. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. A couple of things I wanted to touch on prior to, I know we're having a deeper discussion after this on some of the bills, but the House Education Committee, something that's not in this report, the House Education Committee is supposed to be taking up the start of burdensome reports legislation probably next week. I thought it was going to be this week, but I think they're still drafting some of the bills to get done. And you'll start seeing those in the House side. That's where they're moving them first. The K-12 Appropriations Subcommittee on the House side is taking up 2 bills we discussed briefly in the Legislative Subcommittee about moving the kindergarten start, the birthday cutoff, from December to September, which has been an issue that's been raised. I looked at an old analysis that we had, and it showed that there have been bills introduced every year since, I think, '95 to do this. Every year it comes up, and it never seems to go anywhere. This bill, what's a little bit different is this one provides for a waiver for parents, a way for them to say, hey, you know, my child's birthday is in those 3 months, so if you move it up, they wouldn't be able to get to go, and I think they're ready to go. There's been some debate about that and whether that should be a statewide system of criteria so you don't have wild-ranging systems from district to district. I'm not sure where that will go. There's also been talk about whether it's appropriate at all or whether this is the right time. And I just started having conversations with Lindy Bush from our staff in early ed to hear from the early ed perspective on it. And we'll have more information to come, but I believe per the Legislative Committee's chair, we're going to be discussing it again at the next Legislative Committee, but I just wanted to give you that update since it was mentioned in here. There's also apparently in the discussions in the legislature an amendment to phase it in, so it would be, they'd move it up a month each year for 3 years to make it so it's not quite the financial impact on schools as if they switched it all in 1 year. It's kind of confusing, but if you move the birth date from December to September, it means next year's kindergarten class is only 9 months big instead of 12 months, and then that 9 months goes through the whole cohort. So every year for 13 years, you have one class that's a little bit smaller, and the schools have to sort of adjust for that with their teaching and that. And so there is talk about maybe phasing it in so that it's a smaller percentage change over those 13 years. Wednesday, Senate Ed is taking up the 4 of the bills that are remaining in their committee. One is the conversion schools, and the other 4 have to do with the dual enrollment piece. We're going through with staff and our experts on dual enrollment to see if there's any suggested changes from more of the technical and staff perspective, how it runs side, but I know that that's part of the discussion later under the the open letter that the board is working on. And then the Senate, in a surprise move last Thursday, actually passed the charter school cap bill. It was not on the calendar, was not expected to be taken up, and was taken up and passed 20 to 18 relatively suddenly from I think just about everyone's perspective, including Republican staff. So that's the update I have, because I don't want to bleed into the discussion that they're having.
Okay, cool. Cassandra, please.
I do have a question about that bill. I have it, I printed it out, and granted it's 86 pages long, so I haven't read it again. But I flipped through it a couple of times, and I'm having trouble finding the language regarding the transparency that was in the original. Was that taken out?
No, the only change that they made, my understanding, was they took out the tie bar. It was all of these bills were originally tie barred to each other, meaning they couldn't one. Okay, it's supposed to be in there. I would have to. It's the same substitute, so I would have to go back. My understanding is the same one.
Again, I did read it very closely, so it's
okay.
possible it's still in here. But every time I flip through it, I don't really see it. So I don't know, maybe it's not bolded anymore. But
No, it should still be. I'll have staff double check
I would,
to see if
that
something
would be
happened.
Good because we make reference to that
Sure.
in our statement. So
Sure. I mean, that was a big piece of the PSA report from last year, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Eileen, did you?
I was just going to say, I remember that the first time it was brought up was somewhere between like 11 and 17, and then it's reiterated later on, but I don't know if the pagination is the same.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? We could move right into the next discussion if that makes sense, and Lisa sit here, join us, I think, if that's appropriate. Does that sound okay? So I'll turn this over to Nancy as chair of the Legislative Committee for the next item, I, which is discussion of the Parent Empowerment Education Reform legislation.
This has been previously referred to by a speaker in our public comment session. There was a series of bills from being introduced at the Senate, Senate Bills 618 through 625 that had to deal with a variety of issues, mostly those concerning schools of choice, charter schools, and dual enrollment. The board felt it was important to have these bills considered and make a statement as a board to the legislature about these bills. It was then referred to the Legislative Committee, where we have spent a lot of discussion, a lot of effort, a lot of time trying to put everyone's thoughts together. The document that we are proposing today is termed an open letter from the State Board of Education to the Michigan Senate and House regarding the proposed Parent Empowerment Act, which are inclusive of those bills. This open letter is the best that we could do to come together to consensus. It is not something that every single person agrees with every single word, but then that's the way deliberative process usually works. What we tried to do was, rather than go through and nitpick certain pieces of a particular bill, we tried to look at the overarching elements of school choice, charters, and dual enrollment. And the process, or not the process, but the protocol, I guess I should say, that we came up with was one that included several issues, which I will outline here. One was of high-quality providers. It was felt and believed that the providers for any of our school choice options, and I might add, parenthetically, I believe for any school, any education system, ought to be of high quality. That those management companies, the authorizers, the boards, the purveyors of education ought to have a high-quality background and be able to provide a high-quality education for all students. It's focused on here that authorizers and management companies approved by charter boards seeking an open additional school should only be allowed to do so if they earn the right to charter more schools or expand existing charter schools based on their past success in delivering student achievement, outcomes, and growth. I certainly think that that's an important thing to have in place. One of the concerns that was voiced in this section was that for those people who are new to the state, who don't have a state record, may not necessarily be non-high quality providers, shall we say. So I think that's something we would need to take into account for those who are coming in for the very first time. Another section that we felt very strongly about was the strong charter board authority. It's very clear in the legislation that formed charter schools that the process by which management companies were or were not decided upon rested with a totally independently appointed board, independent, I mean, of management companies. So we have expressed very clearly in here that it is our belief that authorizers, not management companies, should continue to be responsible for choosing the board of a charter school, and that those boards of charter schools should be the ones responsible for deciding if and when they were to appoint a management company and under what terms, and only by that process, not by any other process. The next area was transparency, that we all thoroughly agreed with, that there needed to be transparency in the provision not only of the educational process, but also of the organizational structure, of business practices, of budgets, financial reports, hiring practices, and data collection, making all available to parents, state oversight bodies that are public, and to each other, creating a seamless business operation and a culture of trust with collaborative problem solving. The next area was equal choice and access for all student populations. We felt it was very important that in choice that these not be choices that were limited as to who could apply or who could attend. So we made that very clear that these would include special education populations, migrant children, and English as second language learners. The next area that we felt very strongly about was that any new legislation ought to be accountable. Well, I can't say accountable to accountability. That's not right. They ought to pay heed to accountability in all school choice options. That we support high-quality charter schools and recommend that legislation allowing more charter schools and increased school choice include the following conditions. And we list a number, two, I guess it was, we finally landed on two. Charter schools and choice schools should be held to clear standards for increasing student growth, achievement, and outcomes, and conform to the same sanctions for non-performance as traditional public schools. That all charter schools and choice schools must provide the same comparable student assessment, achievement, and outcome data as traditional public schools. In other words, if they're public schools, they're public schools. They ought to have to abide by the same accountability measures. The next level was under the Constitutional Education Leadership and Supervision Authority vested in the State Board of Education and the current authority of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. We hold authorizers, management companies, and choice schools accountable for oversight. We hold them, we recognize the State Superintendent of Public Instruction should be provided with the authority and responsibility to deny the issuance of a district code when a charter contract contains an obvious conflict of interest as defined by the Federal Education Department General Administrative Regulations, EDGAR. That we codify the existent practice of MDE's Assurance and Verification Program. We feel that it's important that we give our state superintendent and the board more, how shall I say this, a greater role in accountability of charter schools, so that actually when things aren't being met, when measures aren't being met, we actually have a hammer. We have something to do with that. As far as dual enrollment goes for all students, the State Board strongly supports enhanced early college course taking and credit earning for all students. We're interested in measures to ensure the success of dual enrollment that include widening eligibility to all high school students, ensuring post-secondary institutions participate and accept credit for dual enrolled courses, and creating incentives for post-secondary institutions to form more early and middle colleges. There was a lot of a lot of strong feeling that it's hard for schools to want to have dual enrolled students when they have to choose between, do I get a college credit for this? Do I get a high school credit for this? If I only get college credit, then how am I going to meet my high school credits? It's there's no consistency there, and if we're really going to embrace the governor's anytime, any place, any pace kind of vernacular, then we should not be in a situation in dual enrollment where they have to choose which it is that they're going to have credit for, but they should receive credit for both, if they meet the standards, obviously. Another area was finance structures for dual enrollment. We were concerned that the State Board recommends further that the means of paying for dual enrollment be changed to end the current disincentive for K-12 schools to facilitate student participation, creating a positive incentive for K-12 schools and post-secondary institutions to help more students to dually enroll. And this has to do with the money that follows students that go out of local districts then, and vice versa, then the students that are in college not feeling as if they receive the proper incentives to have them in their system and have to pay for them. There's got to be some way that we can meet that halfway in between. The development of innovative practices, structures, and cultures to support education learning environments that lead to success for all students, and the shared learning of successful innovative practices and structures and cultures with all public schools. The whole purpose behind charter schools in its very inception back in the early 80s was that there's got to be a way that you can have a test ground to try new things in different ways to help students become more successful. And then when those are found, to share them with all schools so that they become a best practice for all. That's kind of been lost in this state. To my knowledge, there's only one charter school that has in their charter, and that's the Henry Ford Charter School, that they, on an annual basis, will meet with their local public schools to share what innovative practices and learning they have found, and help those schools then gain from that best practice too. My guess is that there's a lot of innovative practice that has been found in traditional local public schools as well that could be shared then with charter schools as well. So I think that's something we need to get back to in terms of the true intent of charter schools at its very beginning. We talk about conversion schools, too, that we support the opportunity of existing schools to convert to charter status upon the majority vote of faculty or parents, subject to the same requirements as for all other new charter schools, including their past success in delivering student achievement, outcomes, and growth. We talk about virtual schools. The State Board supports additional proposed virtual schools, or what they call cyber schools in the legislation, upon satisfying two conditions. One, that with the review of performance data from two current virtual schools is made, and the clear plans and capacity to implement these schools for holding virtual schools to the same requirements for student achievement, growth, and outcomes as all public schools, and for full participation in school accountability, data collection, and assessment systems. And then at the very end of this, we wanted to thank the legislature for allowing us to be a part of this continued collaborative effort. And we look forward to a continued collaboration as we move forward with this. Unfortunately, a couple of those kind of passed by without us being able to say that from the Senate, but we'll do that from the House side. So that is an overview of what this open letter is about. We would ask that you have a good, fruitful discussion about this, but that we come to some conclusion today and have a vote at the end of the day. That's my hope, because I think otherwise we're going to be passed by without any say. So if it's a nay, it's a nay. If it's an aye, it's an aye, but let's move forward.
Thank you, Nancy. John, Andrea?
A couple comments. Thank you, Nancy and Cassandra and everyone who worked on this. There is a lot in this parent empowerment set of proposals. I think, as we're saying, it deserves thoughtful attention and consideration. It also deserves for the State Board of Education to provide our guidance in a bipartisan way on how the proposed legislation could be improved in order to meet the goals that we state in the beginning as part of how choice charters and the other pieces here could be done well to meet goals of improving education for all students and improving success of all of our schools. And I think it's also important that we as a state board provide guidance to Mike and the department in terms of what we want to advocate for in this charter legislative discussion. And I think what we're saying here is that any and all charters as unleashed under the current legislation is not a good idea, but that there are good, clear conditions that we want to reinforce that would be the requisite elements to support additional charters and lifting of the cap in particular, that they have a quality track record of being high-performing for students. We say in here that we see the most virtue in charters where we have not succeeded in turning around schools despite our best efforts, and as part of them rebranding themselves and transforming themselves and or to provide a new choice where we must for kids. And we also say pretty clearly that there's a set of transparency, accountability, expectations, including meeting the same goals and performance reporting that we expect of all schools if we insist for all charters. And I think these recommendations we're making do meet those targets. And in addition, that we're encouraging as expansive dual enrollment policies and practices as we can for at-risk and high flyers. So together, I'm supportive of this set of recommendations on how this legislation could be improved. And I totally understand that there are colleagues of mine who are not prepared to support the expansion of charters, even meeting these tests and circumstances, and that is both appropriate and important for you all to make your voices heard. And so I do, like Nancy, hope that we will take action today, as well as listen to the voices who may be in dissent.
Other comments? Cassandra, and then Richard, and then Mary Ann.
Well, I too, you know, this document really was, we've worked on this for several weeks now, and there was a lot of discussion put into this and a lot of work, and first of all, I want to thank Nancy for pulling this all together, because I know it was a lot of work. A lot of juggling. We all had some input, which is great, but even after all of the input, I find myself just unable to support the document. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And now that I've said I'm not supporting it, you could probably just, you know, block your ears if you want to. But primarily, there's two primary reasons that I just can't support this. One is it does talk about lifting the cap on charter schools and opening up basically the floodgate of charter schools. And I like the fact that we put in here that we have certain expectations if that happens, which I completely agree with. There should be these expectations. But ultimately, you know, it doesn't change the fact that the state of Michigan has some of the least restrictive oversight, if you will, of charter schools. And until we take a look at the governance structure and work on that and look at what other states do, for example, a lot of states, the State Board of Education has a much larger role in charter schools. Many times they authorize them. They at least, you know, review them. Why don't we have the same kind of structure here? I mean, so that's my concern is, one, we're not really dealing with the governance structure of the charter schools. The second item that I have a really hard time with is on page 4, the conversion schools. I've read this bill over and over again. Nancy and I mentioned earlier, I've read it twice since we've been sitting here. And I just cannot support this bill. I think it's really dangerous. Just to kind of review what this is, it doesn't focus only on struggling schools. It pretty much says that this is available for any school in the state, regardless of what their performance is, and that an entity or a person could, with the support of 51% of either parents or teachers, could approach the local district and request to essentially take over the school. The local district would have 60 days to either approve or deny the request. If they did not approve the request, and this is right out of the bill, if the school board did not approve the application within 60 days after the application and petition had been submitted, the applicant could submit the application to another authorizing body, which could issue a contract without any public input whatsoever. So imagine that as a taxpayer. You have, as a community, you have funded, you have supported, and you've rallied around a school. And someone can just come in and take that school away from you. And you have no vote, no say. I just think I have a hard time saying that I could ever agree with this. And as a board, I would ask, even though I'm voting no, that you consider replacing that language with, we don't support this either. That, you know, we do support community schools. And we support local taxpayers' right to have a say in their school. You know, parents are wonderful, but non-parents pay for those schools too. I'm a non-parent. I pay my taxes. Why shouldn't I have a say in what happens to my school? So I have a hard time. I just can't support that. Those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Richard and Mary Ann?
I guess just a bit of history. One reason why the State Board of Education in Michigan has little to do with charter schools is that the State Board has never bought into the idea of charter schools. So consequently, historically, the Michigan State Board of Education has sidelined themselves and left it to other entities to carry forward the charter school idea. And the idea has proven very popular. It's also proven superior in terms of accountability to our traditional public schools. Since charter schools have been instituted in Michigan, 50 failing charter schools have closed. The Michigan Department of Education has not closed a single failing traditional public school, to my knowledge. So in terms of accountability, charter schools have proven themselves, and they have to prove themselves to their stakeholders, precisely the parents who are the receivers of the services. So I think that the irony of this particular letter is it says discussion on parent empowerment, but it seeks to deny parent empowerment. It says that we, the State Board of Education or the Michigan Department of Education, we know better than you parents, and we have to insist on certain bureaucratic regulations to protect you from yourselves and the choices that you might make. I apologize if I've laid out the issue a little bluntly, but this is why I cannot support the memorandum.
Mary Ann, please.
Thank you. As John says, I'm one of the dissenters who, and I recognize all the work you've done, both of you, and appreciate that. But I think basically what we're talking about in the open letter is a set of factors that we have been talking about since 1994, when this bill was originally passed. We haven't seen any of this addressed by the legislature, by the governor, by anyone outside of this body. We in fact have been talking about this, but you may not remember, Richard, but in 1996, shortly after the bill, the original charter school bill was passed, the governor took whatever power the board had and put it in the hands of the state superintendent and the legislature. So really, the only thing we've had at our means to do anything is to be able to talk about it like this and to have input in our yearly report. But overall, I have watched for the last 18 years while we keep talking about this over and over, and the schools keep expanding. This bill, this series of bills as far as I'm concerned, just opens the floodgates for schools that have not proven themselves. So I'm opposed to this. I'm opposed to expanding charter schools, and I feel overall that it spells the death knell for public education, which is something too revered in this country to be able to play around with.
Thank you. Kat?
Well, I'm part of this opposition as well.
A little louder, Kathy.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just pull it all the way in.
Okay.
Or you can there you go. Pull it down.
Is that better?
I think you can lift it off the ground, actually.
Is that, how's that?
That's a little better.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I too am opposed to lifting, I'm strongly opposed to lifting the cap on charter schools. I think we have 250 of them approximately now. It's either the first or second state in the country in the number of charter schools. Most of them are no better, if as good, as the real public schools and the real public schools. I call them real public schools. It's my own thing. And I too recognize that you worked very hard on this, and you really wanted, you wanted us to come together. And I said from the very beginning I didn't want to lift the cap. I mean, this is not a secret. And I suggested even if we raise it by 25 or something, that we have a limited number so that we don't get an influx of for-profit companies coming into communities and deciding to build a school or open a school and pick their own board and do the things that we think are not good policy and good practice, and just open, as Mary Ann said, open the floodgates to that happening. I think that's the wrong way to go. It drains resources from the traditional public schools, if you will, because every time they open a school, a charter school, and if they attract children from the public school loses the resources. The public schools need more resources, not less, and especially the schools that we consider failing, or the high priority schools or the low performing schools. We've never put enough the amount of resources in there that they need over the years. I think we're doing more now than we were able to do before, but we've been talking about this for years, that they needed much more help than we were able to give them. And then we're taking the money away from them to open new schools. At the same time that we're talking about, but there is talk about consolidation of districts and consolidation of public schools. There are too many districts. We're proposing to open unlimited numbers of every charter school as a district. That's how we have 700 some odd districts instead of 500 some odd districts. I mean, we're talking in such contradictory ways. And I see the public schools as having been the greatest force in this country to develop a country. I received a letter from a constituent some time ago, just a note. It said, "Please save public education. It's what made us a nation." And I agree with that sentiment. I think that is a great description. And I think the charter schools separate everything. Everything is separate. Everything is different. It's not a community thing anymore. Maybe this is probably heresy here, but maybe there's too much choice. Maybe there's, that everybody wants to do their own little thing instead of having something that's for the community, for the common good. We've lost sight of the common good, it seems to me, and I'm very disturbed by it. And there are maybe some good things in some of the smaller bills, of the dual enrollment and that. I like that kind of thing. But the charter schools and the conversion schools, as Cassandra talked about, I think are looking for trouble. I don't think they have any idea what they will have wrought if and when that passes.
So I cannot support this document as it stands now.
Richard, you had your hand back up.
Thank you. First off, let's admit that change is scary. And that school in the next 10 years is not going to look like it looked the last 10 years. And if that's true for inside the classroom, we should not be surprised if its outward structure also has to change to respond to be able to serve the public better. I appreciate the opportunity to acknowledge the work because I've been following the drafts here, and I appreciate where the committee is coming from, and it has certainly been part of the reward of serving on the board this year that we have been able to find a lot of common ground where I didn't think such stuff existed. And I would say that about 80% of the material in this letter is right on. It's common sense. In fact, most of it's already in the legislation under consideration already. So I wanted to acknowledge all that. And finally, simply to observe, I think what made America great is not public schools but freedom. And that's what's at stake here. The freedom of parents to choose to make those decisions rather than having a government agency make that decision for them. There's certainly a role of government for supervision, but I think that our responsibility is to establish policies not just for one system or not to incorporate every educational entity into one system, but to establish rules that will facilitate a multitude of systems, of education delivery systems that will meet the different needs both of our students on the one hand and the differing skills that our state will need on the other.
Thank you. I think Nancy was next, and then John.
I think I would urge my fellow board members to make certain that you have clearly delineated between the proposed legislation and this letter. I hear comments from my fellow board members that address legislation but don't address this letter. I am asking, the committee is asking, that we vote on this letter, not approval or disapproval of the legislation. There's a keen and distinct difference. And so I think it's important that we go back and assess whether or not what we are disagreeing on is part of legislation or this letter. There is nothing in this document that says you should blow open the cap and there should be unlimited numbers of charter schools. There is very clear delineation about what kinds of levels of excellence or quality or whatever you want to call it that they meet prior to being allowed to be a charter school. So there's nothing in here that talks about blowing open the cap on charter schools. There is nothing in here that talks about management companies and private for-profit companies coming in and automatically getting charter schools established. Everything in here talks about a board being appointed prior to consideration of whether or not a management company is allowed or not. The way the current charter school law reads is that charter schools can choose whether or not they want to have an outside management company run them or not. And this is consistent with this letter. So there's nothing in here that allows management companies to run hog wild. There is nothing in this letter that says that parents don't have a say. What it says is if you are a public institution, there are data elements that all public institutions have collected with their oversight and responsibility. I would wholeheartedly in charge of parents being able to do what they need to do for their students. I think it's very important for us to recognize, too, that our lack of, I would go along with Richard all the way, our lack of ability to have input on charter schools has been largely, and for public schools to have input, traditional public schools, has largely been driven by their own behavior. If you go to other states where charter schools are doing well, serving people well, and they are not as politically contentious as they are in this state, those states have their local districts chartering the schools. We don't do that here. We got out of it from a political standpoint from day one, for whatever reason I cannot understand, but we did, and that's why we are where we are. Now, if we choose to become part of the system and part of the management and part of being able to allow choice for parents and having strong traditional and charter schools, we will choose to take part in the system of charter schools. It seems to me that when people and parents are denied, that's when these things get taken out of the hands of their local school district. And so what this letter is encouraging in its very second to last page is that we have strong development of innovative practices, structures, and cultures, and shared learning. That talks to what traditional schools and the current charter schools of choice and schools of choice system could be, not what it is. And I was hoping that this letter would be something that would follow as a framework, not just for this board or local districts, but for the legislature, to say, here are the key elements that are important in choice. And as long as we keep trying to separate the term charter school from public school, as long as we are adamant in that distinction, we will have these problems. Once we embrace school for school, and children for children, and parents for parents, I think a lot of these problems will take care of themselves, because in the freedom and the democracy that will take place, things like management companies running amok, things like local districts that aren't being accountable, things like charter schools that don't have great teachers in them that are helping students, parents will find that out, and they will cease to be supportive of those systems. And I think that's what this letter is all about, is how do you say what is essential in having school success for all children? And whether you call it a charter school, a dual enrollment, a school of choice, a cyber school, a traditional public school, whatever it is, these things, these elements have to be present. So I would encourage this group not to look at the current legislation and vote on this based on that. This doesn't say whether we support that or not. All it says is what we find, and I've said this before in committee, I will use this term again, what we hold to be these truths self-evident, that this is what has to happen in successful education. And then it's up to the legislature to take this document, put it up against their legislation, and say, does that meet the mark? And I'm going to say that in some places it does, and in some places it doesn't. So if we want to have input, we've got to have input in what we believe is important, not what we believe they've done right or wrong. Because otherwise, all you're getting into is a match of pitching forks against each other. And I want to get away from that. I want to talk about what's important for children. And then they'll have to be the leaders they need to be and have to decide, have I met that high level of standard that the State Board of Education wants to keep for all children, or have I missed? And then we can hold them accountable to that. So please, look at this not from the standpoint of supporting that legislation, but from the standpoint of saying, is this what's important for children to be successful? And then we'll go compare it to that legislation. But other than that, I have no opinion.
Thank you, Nancy. John was next.
Well, Dan's writing something. It's no doubt the Solomon-like solution to all our problems.
Yeah.
Or he's doing something else with me.
Spectacular. I just want to return.
I want to echo Nancy's just the encouragement for people to consider their positions. But and Richard, as you've been surprised about us finding common ground, consider whether there's any small changes to this that would allow you to be comfortable with it. And I appreciate both the directness of people's discussion, and I also understand we've got four very principled folks with principled opposition to this open letter, which three believing it still would allow charters and choice to be way too expansive and ungoverned, and one who feel that it's too constraining on charters. So If we vote on this as is, we will potentially have an open letter from some number of the board, and that does not do two things. One, it does not, as Nancy, I think, was saying, it does not give guidance to the legislature on how this legislation needs to be improved. From those of you who believe it needs to be constrained, meaning the legislation, this offers a number of constraints. For those of you who think this guidance is too restrictive, it does not go, it has too much regulation. But we are not then providing any bipartisan or partisan direction on what we think, how to improve the legislation. And I think the legislation needs to be improved. We are also not providing any guidance to Mike and the department and Lisa on what our position is. So they are free to advocate and advise the governor as they see fit without any guidance from us, the State Board of Education. So those two reasons are why I think if we can, it's important to provide some direction on this topic and many other topics that are in front of us. You know, and to Richard's point, I agree, we have not as a board been guiding and shaping and reshaping the charter school debate because we have, you know, the positions here reflect the divergence of views which are out there on charter schools. So I do believe we have an opportunity to make a good statement about how the legislation needs to have clear criteria that improve what is proposed. So, you know, I will move support for this unless Dan has a different solution, and ask for a second, and then let's put it to a vote. But I will ask my colleagues to consider the votes thoughtfully. And if we don't have a majority, it will be some communication from individual members, and we're all free to make our own communications and lobbying as we should.
I have to say, offer here a point of information that my esteemed colleague here, perhaps in his haste to get this board meeting over before dinner time, has forgotten. We can offer we can move, we can second, but there has to be a loud discussion, unless there's no desire for discussion, but we at least have to allow it.
Yeah. So John's moved. Is there a second for versus a continued discussion?
I'll support it. Yeah.
Supported by Nance, and continued discussion then,
Yeah.
if any. Would you like me to call the question then?
Well,
We're all looking at you, Dan.
No,
the
yeah,
question.
yeah, I do want
We've got a lot of
Looks like
discussion.
you're collecting
to do
your
here.
thoughts over there.
Yeah, I'm
Right?
collecting
That's the
thoughts.
only thing we agree on. We should have more discussion.
Yeah, I don't think I have a solution, regrettably, but I do want to make I do want to make a comment. So maybe quickly, it's 5 points. I'd like to give the roadmap ahead of time.
Usually 3, Dan.
What's that?
Usually 3.
Usually 3,
No.
indeed. This is a little longer
Lawyer
than
training.
usual. Maybe it's 4 points with some preamble. So the preamble here. The preamble is, one, I just want to acknowledge the hard work of a number of folks who were involved in trying to pull something together that would allow us to speak as a body on this subject. And I'm sure that as visible as some of that hard work was to me, that there was a lot more hard work that was invisible to me. And so I really just want to acknowledge the folks here at the table who weighed in, particularly who led that conversation, Nancy and John. And I know that others provided quite a bit of input, and just really appreciate the thoughtfulness that everybody brought to this effort. So I was listening to this conversation, and what ultimately struck me is that as I was really struck by the taxpayer conversion school piece, and I've had have some personal concerns with the way that the conversion legislation is currently written. But they're really, I don't think they have to be addressed. So I'm both a taxpayer and a parent. And it occurs to me really that what I want for my children is what I want for all children. And what I want for all children, I want for mine. Fundamentally, it's an excellent school for every child, right? An excellent education for every child. And that is, I think, what we all have in common. Right? At the end of the day, that's what we all want for every child. God help us if we don't. So there are undoubtedly secondary concerns and priorities that people bring to this table, this debate, so on. Whether they are based on principle or not, whether they're based on historical issues or not, or whether they're based on other interest groups and the needs to serve them or not. Hopefully they are all secondary to our interest in providing a great education for all kids. Certainly that's the case for me, as I sit here today. So, kind of using that lens when I look at this stuff, the thing that jumps out to me is that the most important piece of this document and of this conversation, frankly, is the conversation around quality, like excellence. So how do we ensure, from a governance perspective, right, how do we create policy that best ensures that any new school and all existing schools are excellent schools, provide excellent educations for the kids that attend them? And so this quality language is, to me, by far the most important piece of this discussion. Whether we're talking about a virtual school, a chartered public school, a traditional public school, and a conversion school, it doesn't matter, right, how you feel about the relative merits of each and every one of those. The issue is, how do we make sure that whatever the school, that it's a high-quality, excellent school? That's right. And so I would live and die, frankly, on quality language if we could agree to that, and only that. I'd be willing to let everything else go. I have my thoughts about how to do that, right? So that, I guess that is a little bit of a proposal for a way to reframe this. I don't know that we have to take positions on whether charters are good or bad, right? Or traditionals are good or bad, or virtuals are good or bad, or conversion schools are good or bad. I think we've got to take a position on any school, even schools that we haven't even thought of yet, which undoubtedly will come to pass. Any school should be a great school, right, for the kids that attend it. I think that's the bottom line for me.
Thank you. Other comments? John, there's a motion and a second.
This is a suggestion. I would suggest we vote on the open letter, see the result, and then be open to, if there isn't a majority vote, whether there's a delimited statement per Dan's suggestion that we wanted to also consider and potentially vote on.
Could I ask a question?
I'd like to know what that was
Dan?
after. Yeah.
Dan, if this open letter took out titles of different kinds of schools and merely took the buckets that were left as quality pieces, and in the preamble talked about it as, when considering legislation for any public school, the following criteria need to be considered, would that speak to what you're talking about?
It certainly would speak to what I'm talking about.
Okay. That's what I thought I heard. I just want to make sure. Yeah.
So are we, for this vote, voting not on that?
We've already got a motion on the floor,
Yeah.
so we've got to vote on that, and then if we want to do something else afterwards, then we can do something else afterwards.
You know, if you don't, you know what the vote
Well,
is,
we
I
don't
think.
know. Well, we maybe know.
I think we know, but if you don't have to vote on it if you want to come up with some other way of approaching this. But
Yeah,
the
but then that
fact,
goes to
the
next
fact
meeting.
remains, there is legislation that's passed the Senate already. I mean,
And I would
that
just-
that infuriated me. When they did that on the Senate floor, it just showed me that they really are not looking for people to give them any advice or make. But maybe the House will be better.
We can't control that. All we can control is what
But,
we do here.
That's
I mean-
right. But so.
And we knew, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we knew that time was going to be of the essence. We started talking about trying to put together this letter at the last board meeting. So it's been a month of thinking and suggesting and nudging and, trying to shape it and build, as we all threw these ideas into a hopper, and Nancy was trying to think through what it meant, and John. It's been a lot of work. It's taken that long, but here we are. So today has a moment, which is a month into their process, and they're moving forward. The question is, can we say anything to them that will make a difference at this point? And standing back and saying, because you've gone ahead without us, I'm not going to engage, or I'm going to...
No, I'm not saying we shouldn't. But I'm just that really made me angry, and
I understand, Kathy, and Kathleen, I understand completely. I, as someone who didn't get my statement out in front of them before they voted, feels the same way. I feel now that it's time to do it, because waiting or pulling back is not going to solve what we want. It's not going to give us what we want.
So,
And
question?
can I just reiterate, this it is not insignificant. There are a number of thoughtful voices and organizations and interests that are making statements about how this package of legislation needs to be improved. It is not insignificant for the State Board of Education to give its direction and to reinforce some of the areas of improvement, significant improvement in this legislation. The State Board of Education charged to do this under the Constitution, and who hires the superintendent who governs the Department of Education. I mean, this is something we should be attempting to give our best voice to if we can, and that it has some weight, because this is not an unthoughtful group here, as you can tell.
Right. So, how about that? Should we call a question? Yes. We have a motion and support. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same.
no.
Okay, so we've got a 4-4.
Okay, roll call. Austin?
Yes.
Danhoff?
Yes.
Dwyer?
No.
Strauss?
No.
Albridge?
No.
Varner?
Yes.
Weiser?
Yes.
Xylem?
No.
So then, could I offer a second motion?
Sure.
I would offer a motion then that we take Dan's recommendation and we take out all reference to specific schools and make this a statement that has to do with all of public education. And that when considering legislation for all of public education, these important criteria need to be addressed and be thoughtfully put into that legislation.
Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Eileen. Discussion?
So,
What does that mean
what are we voting
in
on?
terms of...
So I would take out, for instance, I would take,
It's still supporting the bills.
no, it isn't.
Correct.
I think I'd have
No.
to see what we're talking about in order to
It's never been
understand.
supporting the bills, Mary
But it
Ann.
does.
It references
it does.
the bills.
Sorry,
Oh,
Nancy,
absolutely,
but
it supports the bills. That's the
Yeah.
whole thing.
But the bills would not ask to have high-quality providers only in order to have a charter school. The bills do not say that you have to have a charter board be the one that picks whether or not there's a management
Still
company.
saying you're supporting lifting the cap on charters if all of these other
That's
things
right.
are
That's
in
what's
place.
different about the
Okay,
bills.
I just want to make that clear because a couple things you have said lend itself to nothing in here talking about expanding charters.
No,
I just want to make that
No,
clear.
I said opening the floodgates to charters. In other words,
Well,
unlimited. There's
no,
nothing in here about being
Thank
unlimited.
you.
They may not have used the word unlimited, but we all know what's going on here.
I guess I'm the one that doesn't then.
As Eileen is handing out the vodka, Richard.
Oh, shoot.
I appreciate the thought that we want to hold up high standards for all schools. And but I think Dan's point for me is the pointed issue. You see, what I think of as an excellent school may not be what you think is an excellent school. And the charter idea allows parents to make the choice. So you can, and my own family is a good example. I had one child that wanted to do violin, so she went to the Detroit School of Fine and Performing Arts. And she didn't ask if they had a good football team, okay? And the other daughter couldn't go to the same school that her sister went to, so she went to Renaissance. And the only question she wanted to ask is her sister there, and will she be compared? and the answer was no. The promise of charter schools, which has not been fully developed in these past 10 years, is the idea of developing specialty programs so that a school can concentrate on, say, a certain type of special education and not have to have an excellent Algebra 2 department. So that a school can develop a Chinese language program over 6 years and not have to fund a gym and a laboratory and a computer lab all at the same time. Sometimes smaller is better. And that's the error that sometimes public schools have gone into by wanting every school to be all things to all students. You end up like the camper at Kmart who loads himself down with equipment for every conceivable emergency and then can't get into the car to drive to the woods. Again, the charter idea is who judges excellence, and I think that we on the board have to kind of agree to disagree on what constitutes excellence to allow the charter idea to bear fruit.
Dan. So I figured we'd end up in this place. I actually think that we're much closer to agreement than you suspect, only because I'm talking about from a policy-making perspective. So I'm not advocating for, I would never measure quality from a policy-making perspective by whether or not every school has a gym, or an art program, or a music program, or what have you. I'm talking about here, so from a policy-making perspective, we should be doing everything that we can to incentivize whoever is opening schools, under whatever form of governance, to do so thoughtfully, based on best practice, allowing some degree of creativity and innovation, but for the most part, following best practices. Yada, yada, yada. I don't want to run through the long list of criteria that might be. The point that I'm making is that the legislation currently as written has no incentive for folks to do that, right? It completely ignores that subject. And I'm quite certain that the folks around this table could agree to a set of things minimally invasive and controlling, but nonetheless fundamentally important, and that we would agree are probably necessary prerequisites to having a policy in place that encourages whoever is starting a school to start one that has a greater chance of success or meeting whatever needs a particular subset of students and parents might want than not. I think it's really that simple, right? So if you have proven yourself to open good schools in the past, by all means, you should be encouraged to open more schools. But if you've proven that you are not good at opening schools, why in the world would we allow you to open more? Tell me what child that serves well.
So, Dana, is there any language or
That's what I'm
even
wondering.
subset of language from the document that you think we might happily come together on quickly? If not, I think we just have to let the chips have fallen where they did.
Absolutely, yeah, so I think the first bullet, if we were to spend our time on high-quality providers, then the sub's there. And if that were the only thing that we were to agree on, and I actually think that we agree on accountability and transparency and
Yeah,
dual
that-
enrollment, so that stuff, frankly, would be pretty easy to keep. But I suspect that if we spent 20 minutes on the high-quality bullet, we'd actually have something.
Do you think we can,
Yeah.
that's what I was just going to say, do you think we can spend 20 minutes on it today?
We probably should if we're going to have input.
I am happy to spend 20 minutes on it today.
Okay, just
Yeah.
want to get a feeling for what people are thinking.
Well, that paragraph, high-quality providers, the educational service provider is usually the firm, like National Heritage Academies, that provides a service, and then the paragraph goes on to talk about high-quality authorizers. The authorizers are the universities or...
Mixes them up.
And so
Doesn't
it's...
mix them up, I want them to be both high quality.
Well, and I guess that's what makes this unclear. Which of the authorizers would you say are high quality? Which ones do you say are not at this point?
So, may I?
Sure.
So this is exactly the point. We don't even have to determine that today. But we should say to the legislature, look, if you're going to put into law that folks should be authorized to open new schools, at least take the time to set a bar for what a high-quality authorizer looks like versus a low-quality authorizer, and allow the high-quality authorizers, whether that's, let's say, 60, and some randomly picking something, right? But the point of democracy is to have the legislature debate this in open public, right, so that we can provide input into it. So I'll just throw something out there, provocative, but not meant to be the quality bar, right? But let's say 60% of your portfolio of schools perform at higher than the district in which they are housed. Or, another thing, 60% of your portfolio is in the top 50% of schools in the state, right? Two wildly different measures. You might agree with one, disagree with the other, you might disagree with both, it doesn't matter. The point is, that's the debate that should be happening. And we should encourage the legislature to have that debate.
I would actually disagree that that's the debate we should have. I mean, that assumes that we should just go ahead and lift the cap.
No,
Maybe
agreed.
the debate is, do we,
That's fair.
first,
That's
do
fair.
we need to lift the cap, and then what does that look like?
So that's fair. I'm coming at this from a realpolitik perspective, which is that the cap is going to get lifted. And if the cap is going to be lifted, let's lift it smartly, right? So we can have that debate too. I'm all for it. Let's have that debate too, but this probably isn't the time or place for it, because practically speaking, the cap will be lifted. The question is, are we going to do it smartly or not?
Richard.
I'm not sure if we're talking about authorizers or service providers. The authorizers are the public school districts, among the leading of whom has been Detroit Public Schools. Are they a quality authorizer? Then the intermediate...
Let's debate that and find out.
The intermediate school districts, the universities, and the community colleges. And so, I mean, it's one thing to talk about a quality authorizer, but to actually define quality is more than a 20 minutes discussion.
Absolutely. So last point, just to make myself clear.
Dan
on
and
this.
John and Mike.
I'm not proposing that we define quality. I'm proposing that we challenge the legislature to open a conversation that would allow for that debate so that quality gets defined, which has been done previously in this legislation. With regard to authorizers versus charter management organizations, so the other piece that I would argue for is that we want to encourage our strongest authorizers and discourage our weakest. That's from an authorizer perspective. At the same time, We want to encourage our strongest charter management organizations and discourage the weakest, or incentivize the weakest to get stronger, right? So to improve your portfolio of schools, so that we actually think that you know that you can open a better high-performing school. And then lastly, I think we want to create some space, or allow for some space, for new operators to show up, right, who don't have a track record one way or the other. It seems to me that that's good policy. And if we could encourage the legislature to simply take the time to generate good policy, the debates on the floor, right, the testimony that we'll have the opportunity to provide will allow for the kind of input that will ultimately generate good policy.
John, please.
I was just going to recommend that we potentially take up the next uncontroversial item. Dan, if you wanted to take a few minutes with your other brain to strip down some language, and we could take it back up again if we get the other next item done. Sure. That was a suggestion.
Can I ask, I wanted a shot at this too, not at the issue. The issue is yours, it's not mine. But if Dan's right about the realpolitik, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe Lisa making a judgment, I like very much the thinking about the quality. I don't know if it's not going to impact next week. If it is going to impact next week, it's worth having today. If it's not going to impact next week, I think we want to do this more thoughtfully. So mine's somewhat of a practical question. Do we have a chance? And the reason is, I think one thing that's been in the back of my mind, for myself really, in this debate and prior to this debate, is I think ultimately we have a lot of things in place for people to make judgments about. Cut scores have added something to that. I mean, it will be very clear to parents whether or not their individual child in that particular classroom, forget the school even, it might be that particular classroom within a school. It might be that child in a virtual cyber school, whether or not they're proficient on what you've decided on cut scores. That's very valuable. I think top-to-bottom lists add things that give value, especially when we've informed it more than kind of the feds have with you know, what Sally mentioned, the 5 disciplines and credit for growth and graduation rates. So I'm getting at, I mean, I'm thinking out loud about how some of those measures that we've already embraced might help us inform quality in a thoughtful way that might. But I get it, if somehow the quality discussion at all is going to impact this next week, then something should be done today. So I'm maybe asking Lisa to weigh in, but others also on that count. Because if it's not, I think we'd want to take a little more time. But if it is going to impact it, I think there's something to be said for trying to at least get the quality discussion on the table.
I can't speak in certainties. I know that House Ed isn't planning on meeting this week. So that would take us all the way to next Wednesday before there'd probably be even a committee meeting on the Senate bill as it's coming over. And then it would probably be the following week, I would bet, before they would report something out of committee. So, I mean, there's a couple of weeks here, I think.
And is it, in terms of the realpolitik, is it likely to be thoughtfully done with other issues on the table rather than the Senate bill?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chairman Scott is open to suggestions. I don't know how much of this is being driven by leadership and how much is by the membership. That's the part is sort of behind the scenes that I don't know.
Probably makes sense then to do something today on the quality, at least the conceptual part of the quality. If that's the case, I get it. Richard, please.
I think that the quality should be defined in terms of meet performance, specifically value added. So it's no credit to a school if they mark it to the top 95%, I mean the top 5%, and those kids just continue to do well. Frankly, I had a child that went to a school that took the cream, and then took the credit, and from what I could see, they had no particular value added to their program other than that they were super selective. Okay, But a school that can take a child performing on the 20th or only on the 20th scale and can move them up 10 points, I think that's what we mean by value added. And I think the same, it's legitimate to apply this to all schools throughout the state, to define quality in terms of the end product which we seek to develop, and thereafter let the chips fall where they may. But I think to cloud this with other considerations then is what causes people to become preoccupied with the bylaws and the regulations and conformity rather than with performance of students.
If I may add to that, if the performance issue were to be something the board was thinking about tying quality into, I would lobby for the top to bottom. And I mean, in theory, one could say that if an authorizer has, because it takes into account a lot of those things, not just the meat, and it also takes into account growth, and it's been thoughtfully done and reliably put together. Theoretically, it could be that, just for the sake of discussion, that the board would want to try to have a demarcation place, that most of the schools would have to be in the top X or something like that. And if not, they're not considered a quality authorizer because it takes, it's already invented. See, I think this still might be what we would have suggested, but I think it's worth suggesting it today if there's some value added to getting a quality measure in the next couple of days, and it sounds like there is. And that's already reliable. It's already thoughtfully done. And I don't have an answer for what you may be comfortable in saying that quality means you're in the top X of that. You have to kind of weigh in. I guess I would say this, just to somewhat to be provocative. If an authorizer, or frankly a school district, I guess depending on how you want to look at it, had all of its schools in the bottom 20%, I would think that would raise concerns. You know, that's kind of an easy demarcation. I'm not suggesting you settle for that. But you know what I mean? You could use that as a pretty fair way with 5 subject areas, credit for growth, graduation rate, and some other things related to that for all 4,000 schools, and it would at least give us a sense. I mean, if I were still superintendent, like a real one, I would be looking, seriously, I would be looking at where my 35 schools 20 years ago were. And if I had, it's not going to happen in this, but for the sake of discussion, if 28 of the 35 schools were in the bottom 10%, I should probably be removed. You know, I mean, there's a point where how do you start to use some of these things, especially when they get to be that much of a mass. So I'm wondering, again, I'll use, not to be provocative, I don't mean it, but if authorizer X, whether it's Detroit or Grand Valley or whatever, had the majority of its schools in the bottom X%, they're probably not a quality authorizer. And would expand that to be schools, since Dan was pushing for generic, appropriately I think, for a generic review of that rather than, so that's a thought.
I think given the real politique, if we can circle back after we dispense or work through quickly the next item and give ourselves a chance at saying something, I think it's worth it, because the trying to get back together, as we've seen, is very challenging, and as we've already seen, people act. So Dan's, I see, working, and maybe with Eileen's help, but that would be my recommendation. I'm afraid if we break, we'll never get restarted here, so I think we can get done in half an hour, 45 minutes if we proceed apace.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Sound good?
Okay.
So J we removed, so we'll come back to I in a little bit. J we removed, and we're to K.
So K is
discussion of State Board of Ed communications policy. I'll turn over to John.
So, and this is, I think, the one where we're going to respectfully disagree, probably some of us, but one that I hope we can act on. This was generated at a retreat around particularly when and how is it appropriate for individual board members to utilize some assistance of the MDE communications functionality to share their opinions, statements, op-eds, etc. And that was the particular issue. We had an informal bipartisan discussion, inconclusive. Did look at other states. Frankly, the other states have not actually wrestled with this and come up with firm set of policies and practices that, as I noted in my report, boy, that's something we probably should do. There were some examples, particularly Utah, of at least one example where they enabled some functionality for board members and the department to kind of share their perspective as individuals along with group statements through blogs, statements, Twitter, email, et cetera. So my recommendation, and this is really informed by a perspective I have, I know it's not held by all, but by some perhaps, that the State Board of Education in Michigan there is no real analog in terms of other states and elected bodies that govern education, or even others elected bodies here in Michigan. You know, I remember a few years ago, and Nancy would remember, when people made their most recent run at abolishing the state board and having the governor appointed, it made me read through the Constitutional Convention minutes and notes about what they were trying to accomplish with the State Board of Education when it was established as it is today in the 60s. And it was very, very, very purposefully established, given the importance of education, that they wanted in Michigan. The Constitution Convention said, we want a political body that are elected officials who are the direct representatives of the people, that are focused on education full-time, but are politically charged by the people, elected leaders. We want to buffer them from day-to-day politics by giving them long terms, like the U.S. Senate, in our case 8 years, so that we could be thoughtful and deliberative about education policy. And as you know, the language says, you know, that is our job, is to provide leadership and supervision of all educational policy. And that's part of why I think it is helpful and important for us to be able to realize our mandate, which is to have communication both as a group but also as individuals on education policy issues, our positions, communicate with our constituents, and vice versa. So that is just a role that I think we play that doesn't have analogs that are important for us to animate. Now, that said, you know, the recommendations that are in here are based on our discussions. I think it is important that we collaborate. When we make a majority decision, that is our policy, and that we should obviously share that point of view through, with assistance from the Department of Communications Office. We should also, if we are communicating with all these education stakeholder groups, that should reflect something that we have agreed to as a majority group. I do think, though, that it is important for individual state board members to be able to share their individual viewpoints on education issues if they're clearly labeled as such. This is from individual state board members, or a number of individual state board members, is not reflecting the State Board of Education position, and that we should be able to get some assistance, as you know, we discussed this in terms of sending this out through the media, to editorial contacts, through MDE, as clearly labeled as state board members' positions, that would be helpful. And making that's the main point of the recommendation. I think it would be helpful to investigate whether we wanted the cost of developing something that was more interactive, a la Utah, that allowed board members and the department to have more back and forth with our constituents, and would also facilitate the kind of point of view communication quite easily of individual board members. But I think the main point of this recommendation is that I don't want to have to do what I did last week, which is feeling it's incumbent on me as a state board member and president, because of your support, but as an individual board member weighing in on the right to teach legislation, I don't want to send that out to the Michigan Democratic Party. It is not a party statement. It is my statement as a state elected official, president of the State Board of Education. And I think it is totally appropriate for that to come out from this office, because that's what we're elected to do per the Constitution. And I would say that, I think, if I was in the minority, I know I would. I think it's appropriate for the board to speak together. I think it's appropriate for individual board members to share their points of view, give their direction on education policy as they see fit. That's your job. That's our job as elected officials responsible under this Constitution for providing political leadership for education. So I would move support for the recommendation.
Support. Moved by John, supported by Mary Ann. discussion. Eileen?
John and I agree on, is this actually on? Or are we just speaking up
Do this.
loudly?
Yeah.
Yes, hi, okay. John and I, John just paraphrased, let's see, this is, how do I turn this on? I have the Constitution excerpt on my computer. See if it actually goes up there.
You realize the irony of asking for departmental help in expressing your point of view.
Yeah, I know, anything to do with technology.
And arguing against allowing departmental help for expressing points of view.
We're all staring at the screen as if something miraculous will happen. But the leadership and general supervision over all public education, including adult ed, instructional programs, and state institutions, except as to institutions of higher ed granting baccalaureate degrees, is vested in the State Board of Education. It shall serve as the general planning and coordinating board for all public education and shall advise the legislature as to the financial requirements in connection therewith. We appoint a superintendent. We're elected, 8 of us are elected by party conventions for 8 years as prescribed by law. The governor appoints any vacancies. The next document that I have up, which I'm going to scoot right through, is our goals and priorities: significant and meaningful improvement in the academic performance of all students and children, with major emphasis on the persistently lowest achieving schools and students. And I want to take you to the Utah site. I have to say, John, I apologize because indeed the Board of Ed members do have an exchange with the public, which I'll show you in a second. I was on this site last night quite late, and the Twitter and Facebook pages at night are different than they are during the day, when the Department of Ed has a chance to kind of clean up the University of Utah, or the Brigham Young University football discussions and whether staffers should have romantic relationships with people. So, but I just want to take you through it because it is a beautiful blog page, and they're the only one in the country that has this, from what John was able to find out. I couldn't find anything else. The issue for me is that when you go down to the lower right corner where it says popular posts, and you go into that, 3 of those opinions are written by one board member, 1 by another, and there's only 25 responses to why charter schools matter. There's 20 to are Utah schools teaching the Socialist or Communist Party line, 8 to the case for performance pay, and another stark comparison showing appalling funding of education in Utah, 7, and here we go again, 6. So it's a little bit polarized toward one board member. There are 2 other opinions in there. So it's has very limited use. If you go to Facebook for Utah education, again, when you look at the use, it's down here in a minute, but there are no discussions. There are no friends for Facebook. Last night I was able to see friends and there weren't any. But there were 2 questions. Okay, I'm not going to log in because I have a very eclectic Facebook account, which you see. It's everybody from my brother-in-law in Richmond, Virginia, who's convinced he knows about education in Michigan, to people I've never met. But when I went into this last night, there were 6 months ago they posted these 2 questions. Would you recommend liking Utah Public Education's Facebook page, and how many ways do you follow Utah Public Education? There were 4 votes on whether you would recommend it to anybody in 6 months, and 12 votes on how you follow Utah Public Education. It's a multiple choice adventure.
So they don't do it by Facebook, evidently.
Well, again, extremely limited access. And the Facebook page is a good one. It's not an issue. 290 people like it. 13 are talking about it. Okay? And if you go back again and go into, oops, maybe I'm stuck in Facebook. Hang on just a second here. If you go into Twitter, that's where the football discussion kind of took place. But today, they've had a chance to get into it. I'm sure that that they post on it every day. There is a lot of education stuff. It is interesting material. It's not something that we currently have on our website. There's a the State of the State address apparently is tonight. And there's just a lot of nice chatter on it about schools. But again, 3,600 tweets, 1,200 people following, 60 listed people using it, if I've read that right. And then when you go into YouTube, this one I thought was really interesting for us because we've been talking about having presentations for everything from municipalities that are doing a good job of birth through grade 12 coordination. We've had presentations here that I would love to see put out someplace and be accessible. So this one, again, is, it's here, on-track training for college or for course requesters, supporting keyboarding education. But then when you go down here and see who's using it, they've had 1,800 channel views, 3,100 uploads. It's been in existence only for about 10 months. The last person on it was 2 hours ago. It has 24 subscribers, which is up from last night, which was 22 last night, and one of them was the Utah Senate. So they use this in a way that we've got Lisa. I don't know how much of communication they have with their own legislature. I can't tell from this, and I don't know whether when you talked with them they explained the package they've got, because they still have a very functional website with a lot more information on it. So in some ways, I think that if you build it, they don't always come. We have the same issue at the governing board. We have no privy to how much money is being spent, but we selected a new web contractor and a new marketing communications firm about 2 years ago who are spectacular. We have our own staffers there. And our job at the governing board is to do the national assessment and communicate it. That's the whole point. So for us, they're monitoring feeds for, there's one of me that I had no idea was there for the University of Michigan. So they're pulling in and coordinating all of the data for their board members to try and give more visibility for the assessment. My problem is that I don't see how additional media, social media, I was prepared to be charmed and convinced, but with what Utah has done and the few number of people who are involved in participating, I don't see the bang for the buck on it. And I think it's a big diversion of resources if we can do on our website the communication that's necessary to maintain the position that we want for children. The issue for me, so when I look at what John proposed, the first 3 bullets, individual State Board of Ed members are privately encouraged to share their individual viewpoints on a logo and letterhead. I have no trouble with that. But for me, there's no upside to the amount of money that would have to be spent on an institutional presence for social media at this point. I'd be happy to reevaluate this in a couple of years, because things do change. Certainly when the governing board put together their packages for Twitter and Facebook 2 years ago, it looked like a bright current image. It didn't look like it was going to be something that was going to be used tomorrow. So I recognize that things could change. As far as whether or not board members should be communicating individually through the State Board of Ed, the Department of Education, I view anything that is I view that us as a collective body. I absolutely agree that we should have divergent opinions, and I believe we should be able to put them out. But I can find no national or other state body that's elected that allows dissent within its institutional communication. The State Board of, the Wayne State doesn't allow it. Michigan doesn't. The University of Michigan doesn't, and nor does Michigan State. I also know, having just run for office, how easy it is to do external websites and Facebook pages and to link them to information on the MDE website or other materials that you can just put the URL out down, and in your own Facebook page people can just zap to something that you've said or done on the Board of Education's or the state or the MDE website. It's not an issue. I think that what we would be well served to do is that within the minutes, it's not always reflected why people dissented. Sometimes there's a discussion, but and I think that chronicling it better would be important. And then from there, I would question whether it's a personal or institutional use to be trying to use the MDE communication strategies for telling outsiders what you believe to be different than the group consensus. Because for me, it needs to be an institutional message.
Just quickly, very respectfully, in response to the last point, we obviously are just in a disagreement. I think dissent from elected officials is our job, and we are elected to the State Board of Education, and that's part of what we should be doing. I think, with all due respect, I think you're in part. Remember Liz's encouragement for us to get much more active on all of these fronts. This is where we need to be. You, to me, are making the case, because that's whether there's 2,500 or 3,100 or 25, that's that's 3,100, 2,500, 25 more than we have in terms of some attention, discourse, all of which is healthy. And the cost is free or zil, but the recommendation before you is not that we do that, but it is to ask our folks, look at what it would cost just to turn on a Facebook page, or we should do that. We should just go ahead and do that, or look at, or do something like Utah. That's all I'm saying. But I think on the ability to communicate from our offices with the, as Mike said, if we as a board, as a majority, say we want to do that, it's a press of a button, and it doesn't take a lot of time to send out a press release from here on behalf of Mary Ann or Richard or Kathy or the three of them together.
Nancy.
I'll wait until he's
Okay.
finished. First of all, I think it's important that we not minimize the amount of time and effort that goes into any of these things. It isn't just pressing a button, ever. If you are using an organizational and institutional process, there are protocols they have to go through in order to make sure that they have met all liability laws, in order to make sure that they have met all protocols for the state government. There are many different things they have to do that isn't just pressing a button. The fact that we are individuals, you have made the case, the fact that we are individuals means that we have the individual right to go out and send, just as you did, you and Dan did, to the media. You don't need a party, you don't need an institution. You can send those opinions, you can call the people up. They're not going to refuse your call. You're the state board president, John. They're going to take your call. My guess is they're going to publish what you write. I do not believe the use of public funds for public media in time-consuming and we have so many important things to do here. Having a personal PR consultant is not one of them. And I just cannot abide by that. I can't imagine myself ever using that. And I'm running for re-election next year. And I won't use that because I don't believe it's appropriate. I absolutely agree that when we have voted as a board on something, that we have every right and should have this office send out what it is the board as a body believes in. But I do not believe we have the right as individuals to ask of this department to send out individual comments on what we believe or don't believe, or what we want to see happen or not happen. And I think that with social media the way it is today, and with listservs the way they are today, that we all must certainly have, that there is nothing that hinders us or prevents us from getting our message out in other ways than to take the time and energy and money here to do it. Having just put together a Facebook page for my business, having just put together in the last year a website for my business, I will tell you it is anything but easy. And you have to go through quite a bit of hoops to do that. So I think that we need to think carefully about the time and money that we would be spending and the time we would be taking from staff from doing things we really need them to do something for us that we have the capacity to do on our own.
Can I just mention something too? It just hit me what, I don't think with any malice, but what you might have been inferring. I purposely haven't had a conversation with any one of you about this at all, offline or anything. I do think if what you meant that it was odd that Eileen was using staff to do this, I'm assuming when I saw Eileen with Marty as I walked by at lunch, she was probably looking to get help on this. And if I might just drill down on that for a minute, since it's based on an item here today, I don't know how, if that's what that was, I don't know how Marty would say, no, I'm not going to help you have something to make your point today.
I just said it's ironic because she's making my point. I want us all to get the help from Marty that helps us do whatever, communicate.
But I'm making a little different point, John, which is, to me, what you're discussing now is our help in a different way, not as a board making a decision, which is added. See, I made a judgment on Friday that Merck's appropriately, since they put me on the spot on, but in the best sense, it's my job to do this as both superintendent and chairman of the board. But I made a judgment that, yes, we would put John's out on the web, even though in a way I wasn't exactly sure. I'm thinking, okay, these are John's thoughts about it. I know you, to your credit, you sent it out and said, are there any reactions to this? but in my mind, it was still something new in the sense that we've not put live anything from one person out before, but it was connected with an agenda item, and people had a chance, so we said, yeah, let's just put it out. Let's err on the side of transparency and moving the agenda. So I'm only just trying to clarify if there was a thought a little different than that. I myself have pretty much stayed out. I do have fairly strong feelings about this, but I've not expressed those to anyone here because I don't think that's necessarily for me to do yet, if at all. But I just wanted to clarify that. If that's
It is different in character, but I asked for this item to be on the agenda. The agenda planning is not coming from a committee. It is a recommendation for action. I would ask you to call the question, I guess, unless there's other comments fellow board members would like to make.
Okay, it was moved by John, supported by Mary Ann, I think. Is there further discussion? Okay, if that's your will, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
No.
Nay.
We have a roll call, please.
Austin?
Aye.
Danhoff?
Nay.
McGuire?
Aye.
Strauss? Aldrich?
Yes.
Barnum?
Yes.
Weiser?
No.
Riley?
No.
5 ayes, 2 nays. 5 ayes, 2 nays.
Oh,
Or three,
that's-
I'm sorry, 5 ayes, 3 nays.
You know, at the risk of, it is what it is, we'll do our best to carry it out. I'm very concerned. I think it will put me in a very awkward spot many times. The worst case scenario would be one I would envision, because we have talented people on the board who in the best sense are ambitious, and I could see what if Eileen and John run against each other for some Senate or congressional or some seat? I'm going to be sitting here trying to make judgments, I guess, about what might be perceived our use of this operation in order to do what. And I think it really puts me and staff in a very awkward position, even, and I say this obviously respectfully, not only to Richard who's here, but to, well, let me just, as a generic statement, say that board members that run, you know, the last thing we would have needed with Richard now as a good and thoughtful member of the board would be perhaps a perception that we assisted status quo folks. I mean, that's not the right word. You're anything but that. Incumbents. You're anything but status quo folks. But incumbents to position themselves kind of what Nancy, I think, might have been inferring about herself. And these are just worries, and it is what it is, and I'll have to try to figure out how to work with this. But it's less the workload, as John said. You can push a button in some ways. I think it's more of a workload, as Nancy said, than folks imagine on the new social media side. But I think I heard John saying we can spend more time to think about that part, so that's correct. But just even the hit the button piece, I would think if I had been hitting the button or authorizing the hitting of the button on issues that incumbents had asked to be out, that you might have, as a non-incumbent, have had some issues with us by the time you were elected. But I wish we'd had a little more time for discussion. I didn't realize, I guess the votes were already there, so it was done.
But can I just say in
that
part of the
earlier.
response, I mean, we're the elected board members. It's up to us to use our judgment and our responsibility responsibly in terms of how we choose to communicate with our constituents and use tools that further that interaction with our constituents. So that is our opportunity, our responsibility to do that well and smartly. It is, we are the political leaders of the State Department, the State Board of Education. Just as you, working for us, we trust to use your communications facility responsibly and in service of goods and goals that we are shared with. We have a responsibility to use our good judgment as the people's elected officials in what we choose to say, do, and communicate. And if we obviously further it for any inappropriate, transparent political offices, that comes back pretty quickly.
Well, maybe. I mean, I just know from some of my colleagues how this has become a real problem for them personally and for their operation. And I do think you risk diminishing the impact of a board majority on issues when you walk down not anything but a well-intentioned path. I'm not charging that at all. But I think it has the potential of Pandora's box on issues like the ones I just mentioned. And I also think that you get to a point where the board of the majority, I mean, I've been your biggest champions in terms of every place I go, as I think you know, recent testimony, speeches I give, that this is the place where there's bipartisan Republican and Democratic thoughts brought together, thoughtfully debated, and presented as a whole board. I think this is, I'm going to just go on record, this is very much jeopardizing that, in my view. I'm not the decider of that, as someone once said, so that's your call. I do think I'm a different issue. If I say this immodestly, I apologize, but you know, you saw Larry giving the state of the education tonight as the state superintendent, not the board president.
I can't hear you.
Not the board president, not a board member. Luana Simon's the president of Michigan State University. It's rare, without disrespect, that trustees themselves have a specific role. They do as a unit, obviously, because they can decide that Luana is not the president and also have important impact on policy and other things for the university. But I think it is what it is. I need to just shut up at this point. I just didn't realize. I was ready to jump in. I just didn't know we were going that quickly for a vote after we spent 2 hours on the previous issue. And this one, in my mind, is far more important than that issue because it sets up our practice for years to come, I think. Please.
I think going forward, I think we all should be sensitive to your concerns, and I think most of us are. And going forward, I think I expect we'll have no problems. And if not, then we can review the issue. So I think we can just go forward with it.
Well, not overtly.
And let me ask, this
So,
was
is
provoked.
the time for discussion on this passed? And I'm wondering if, I mean,
Right.
like, literally,
Yeah.
we can come back to this at any point
And I just
in
want to
time if
note,
we actually want to have a
Well,
vote, but I'm
we
not
decided to
sure that-
clarify this through a formal board action, which is more than other boards have done. And so I hope everybody appreciates that. We did not seek to short-circuit that process, and that's what we have done. Go back to the charter school.
Well, okay, I will respect my own request.
Sorry.
Are we ready to move or no?
Move
Yeah.
what?
Are we ready to move forward?
Yes.
Or
Yeah,
no?
we're just waiting for you to say something here.
Okay. I mean, I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
if people are complete enough to actually have a conversation about this other piece as opposed to still, you know, as if we're not ready, then we're not ready, and we just need to go ahead and finish the conversation, and I probably should just shut my mouth and kind of, you know, not have interrupted. But
We can go home if you prefer.
I would love to move the conversation, but I want to respect the needs, potential needs of others to not do so. So I'm calling that question. But hearing no objection, okay, we'll move forward. All right. What's that?
I said, I don't think it matters.
What's that?
I think that we're done with the one, and so whatever people's feelings are, it's done. And so we need to move on to go to that which we need to consider next. So I don't, you know, as much as I appreciate your thoughtfulness, I think that it's passed, it's done, let's go.
Great. Well, as you know, I agree with you. Just wanted to make sure that we were all in agreement. Okay, so my best effort at this, I'll try and read it slowly. To ensure the success of all students, all new schools should be developed in a regulatory environment that encourages the creation of high-quality schools, allows for some innovation, and discourages the creation of schools likely to be of low quality. That's the lead bullet. Two sub-bullets. Legislation authorizing the creation of new schools should only apply to authorizers who have a proven track record of success. Such a track record might be measured, for example, by the percentage of their schools that are improving student performance, or the percentage of their schools that are performing at or above the state average, or the percentage of schools performing above their district counterparts. Those authorizers should be free to use their proven process to vet proposals. Second,
I'm sorry, just to clarify, you're talking about authorizers, not management.
that's just authorizers, right. And the whole point of the last sentence, those authorizers should be free to use their proven process to vet proposals, means so they have achieved a high level of performance, right, by vetting all the proposals that have come before them and choosing the best ones and managing them effectively. Whether they were new or already proven charter management organizations, we should trust them to continue using that process effectively. They've earned that right, it seems to me. Earned that right maybe is too strong a language, but we are willing to trust them, right, that they'll continue to do that until the data suggests otherwise. So it doesn't speak to the quality, or to a quality bar for charter management organizations, because these authorizers, we believe, are able to separate the wheat from the chaff.
But the authorizers don't choose the management companies.
Well, true, but they choose the boards who...
Not,
Right.
Well,
not officially.
we know how it works,
Right,
right?
right.
Yes,
We know how,
right.
that's practically speaking, the point is that their process has proven successful, right? If the quality, if let's assume that a good quality bar gets set, that process is proven successful, right?
Okay, go on.
I mean, I would, if not, then I don't.
I think what
don't even know
Dan's
why we're
saying
having
is
this
that they've done the bad job of picking management companies, or management companies picking board, then it'll show them in their level of quality of education for children, so that'll be in itself. Is that what you're saying? That'll be in itself?
Here's my point. So let's just set the bar at a place that we all agree would be high quality. So let's assume that there's an authorizer out there, the majority of whose portfolio, every school is above the 50% line, so they're all, in the upper half of schools in the state, and the majority of their portfolio is at 90% or better. Like, they're killing it. They are a great authorizer by that measure, right? Wouldn't we want them to continue to use the process they're using? It's obviously pretty effective. That's the point that I'm making there. Whatever the quality bar is that gets set, let's let those folks do what they've been doing, because they're doing it well. Let's not mess with success. The second sub-bullet is, now success has to be defined, right? But that's the point of the legislative process. So let's actually encourage the legislature to have the open debate so that success gets defined. Second sub-bullet, legislation authorizing the creation of new schools should not apply to authorizers with a poor track record. Didn't even bother to define it there. So once you set the quality bar, everything below it is a poor track record. Let's not let those folks, who we don't trust to open good schools, open more, right? They then have the incentive to get their portfolio to the place where they would earn the right to open more new schools. They're actually incentivized to get better with the schools they have using this rubric. So that's the language. I think secondarily, we could keep some of the other bullets that I suspect are not controversial around the dual enrollment, the two accountability bullets, the transparency language, and the board authority language. But we could have a quick conversation and figure out whether those were too controversial to maintain.
You want to keep the bullets about innovation and in the bottom of page 3?
The two one-sentence
ones?
Those are fine. I was taking the meaty ones.
Oh, okay.
So is that the entire statement we'd be sending, or is that just replacing what's right here?
So I was assuming that we would pull out the language on conversion schools, which seemed to be controversial. Although I don't know, I mean, we didn't actually take straw votes on each paragraph, so I don't actually know this, and I'm not proposing that we do that. But if intuitively it just seems, like something we're not ready to agree on, then let's take it out. So it seemed like that. It seemed like there was one other paragraph.
Can you describe, if we took the letter as we have, what are we eliminating totally, and where does your language go in?
and then we can decide if we can do anything.
So my assumption was that we might be eliminating the last two, the conversion and virtual, since they would fall under this quality language. I mean, we might have additional stuff to say about them, but I suspect that it's not that significant a value add to the legislative process currently going on. Particularly if a quality bar is set, it would apply to all of those schools, so I'm not sure how much it would matter. I didn't hear people talk about the schools of choice piece, so I don't know if that's controversial or not, but if that's overly controversial, it certainly could come out as, you know.
Schools of choice.
And then, and that was it. So then it's just replacing the high-quality providers paragraph and leaving the rest of the stuff as is.
How about the opening two paragraphs? Would you want to replace them, or?
More importantly, with those that didn't support the letter, want to throw out those.
Right, that's really the question. I voted yes, so.
Yeah, I should wait and let them respond.
It's still advocating for the expansion charter.
And you're principally opposed, got it, yeah.
In terms of time for thoughtful and worthy consideration,
Well, I wrote it, so I thought it was all pretty good, you know. So I'm not the person to ask.
Yeah. I would take out the second paragraph.
Shall I read it again? Is that helpful or no?
Well, I'm with Mary Ann. I mean, my original concern was that of the governance structure that we have, and we don't really address that. And we kind of, you know, we're saying in here, we support the expansion. Under the governance structure we have, I don't support the expansion.
So what do you mean by, I think maybe there's a confusion here about what we mean, because I think Dan believes that what he's just said does talk to the governance structure. Because if that's the criteria, then the governance structure has to change that currently is. But what do you mean by governance structure?
What I mean by governance structure is the fact that we have essentially authorizers, right, who are responsible for authorizing charter schools, who have a vested financial interest in them, with very little oversight from the state level. The assurances and verifications that we have is completely voluntary. You know, I just don't think it's like, you know, the fox guarding the hen house. It's, you know, there has to be an organization or a structure set up that is not directly vested in the actual oversight of the schools. I think, you know, you have to have some checks and balances in place, and I think we're lacking those right now.
What would be a check and balance that you would agree to?
Well, for example, having a publicly elected board that is responsible for
no, I see what you're trying to
yeah,
get at.
that is
That's what I was trying to
responsible
figure
for-
out is what you were trying to get at.
Right, someone who's responsible for the general public, for voters, for taxpayers, that is directly involved in who gets to pick schools or what schools are created, or, you know, something along those lines, that there's
Here's the, although I might agree with that, here's the challenge I've always had in my mind, trying to figure out publicly elected board. A charter doesn't have a district with no geographic line, so who is the public that's electing them?
Well,
is it statewide elections?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way other states work with charter schools, a lot of them do have a board that is set up specifically for charter schools.
Right, but what I'm saying is, where does the who are the public that are electing them?
It could be statewide.
So it sounds to me as though, I apologize for interrupting, but it sounds to me as though it doesn't sound as though, Cassandra, you would be a yes vote under any circumstance here. So while this is an interesting debate, I think for the purposes of figuring out whether this...
Or another tack, is there, if Dan's substitute for just a statement about high quality was acceptable, I'm not sure it is, but just forget everything else. Is there any statement we want to make about high quality schools? as guidance given this debate.
We've done that all along.
All right.
We've always been for high-quality schools.
I was just trying to decouple some statement about high-quality schools, charter choice, out of the context of the rest of this stuff, to see if there was a path there to say something simple. If not, that's fine too.
I think if Lisa could have in her hip pocket, even if it's not with a formal statement, that there seems to be some consensus around infusing quality in a meaningful, measured way, and we would like to offer up the one we've spent so much time on, as the top to bottom list. And I think, it doesn't mean we have to today decide is it the 90 percentile, 50 percentile, just getting on the table, quality should be in there, and secondly, that there are some tools. As an example, one would be the already established top to bottom list. Because I think the way Dan said it, some of this does seem so easy in a way. If one were to see that all the schools were up here, would we really be that concerned about their process? Things made sense. But what I'm getting at is to maybe declutter this a little bit. We'd like to be in a spot, if you want to have some influence, to at least be able to say there seems to be thinking around high quality, and some of the measures we already have in place might inform that.
But we still don't have consensus on lifting the cap on charters.
Right, and she wouldn't project that.
If you're talking about talking to Lisa about her testimony and so on, she should keep that in mind, that there is a group on this board that is opposed to expanding.
She's saying that there's a group that's opposed. She wants to know, Lisa, to make sure she includes, there's a group that's opposed on the board to lifting the cap.
Right.
Under any circumstance.
But let's say, where I'm going with this is, right, Lisa's not going to not recognize the 4-4 vote today. I meant if...
She is not going to recognize...
She's not going to...
She's
Of course she's
not.
going to. She's not
She is
not.
going to.
Of course she's going to recognize that.
Just clarifying.
But what I'm getting at is that if Dan's right, and I think he is, that this thing's going to move, then you'd at least want, I think, to have some impact on the fact that, kind of like you've been trying to do, that they take quality into consideration. This isn't saying that, this would be like, if that's going to happen, here's something we think you should take.
It gives them a reason to pass it. And I think if there is a segment here that says not to pass it.
Well, we don't have to give them any insight at all. I mean, if that's easier, but...
No, but I think this discussion gives a pretty full sense of the board's perspective, and I think this is one of those cases where your good judgment, at least about how to interpret that, and what guidance you also beyond that think is appropriate to give, is what we should encourage, and I do. So I think you're framing it at top to bottom. You have a license to do that, because we certainly haven't come up with any different, better, or counter recipe. So that's where look to you to frame it as thoughtfully as you can, given the sense of direction, imperfect from this spot.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And if I just make the case for the parent who chooses the lesser quality school, and I think the parent ought in principle have that choice, whereas we ought not require a parent to send a child to a low quality public school just because that's the only game in town. A parent may choose a lesser quality school because my kid is safer, or because they have the program my child needs, or transportation difficulties. I judge that other needs that are met for this reason are for that. I teach in that lesser quality school, and so my child is going to attend with me. And there may be another dozen reasons that a parent may legitimately choose a school that we might classify as lesser quality. And I don't want to take those choices needlessly from parents.
I think that makes sense.
I apologize. As a parent, I've got to go intercept a child. So I just
Gee whiz. We're going to have another meeting of the Legislative Committee next Monday. Is that going to be too late to hammer this out?
Well, it just doesn't sound like there's a compromise to be reached.
I
mean, I
can't say what you can't say.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I will
A
be
lot of
as
effort,
an individual.
Lisa, Ross, and yourself.
I guess that leaves us free to say what we want to say, yeah.
You're obviously welcome to do what you'd like at your legislative meeting, but
I can't hear you, Mike. What do
you're certainly welcome to do what you'd like at your legislative meeting. I'm just cautioning that if you don't really think there's a middle ground, I hope we'd be sensitive. But one thing, I didn't obviously state it very well, but I do think there's a role for Lisa that we will use judgment on, where you'd hate to not at least inform a piece of this that I think I did hear agreement on, just because we don't have it on the cap. You know what I mean? The 11th hour, if it's very clear there's going to be a cap increase, why wouldn't you also say, well, given you're going to do it, you know, here's what we think you should be thoughtful about. But I hear the caution, not as if we're not with what your vote was today, as if we're encouraging that.
Just to be clear about that, so I saw Mary Ann shaking her head, and I want to provide you some cover, or at least some clarity. So the dual enrollment piece, I think there's unanimity on. I'm pausing. So it sounds as though there's unanimity on. So I think in the 11th hour, you certainly, right, Mary Ann, could weigh in on that. I'm pausing again.
Yeah,
No?
I don't want to start picking,
Yeah,
because then it can...
might as well, because you gotta have something to say, or
Yeah,
we become...
right, I think...
We
So-
become no voice.
So my position on this then is
something
that-
very straightforward to say, and that is that the way charters are set up now, and the way they are unproven is a success story, I am not in favor of lifting the cap. I don't know how much more clearer I could make it.
But that's not a majority of the board position.
That's not the
true.
question on the...
That's true, but Dan was asking me how I felt.
This is where, and I
About the
don't mean
dual
this in a
enrollment piece, for
sarcastic
example.
way, but this is where there may be some decisions, and I'm not sure I would fault them after the policy change today, where you would each express your own opinion and we'll hit the button. I'm not sure what that does. We'll have 7 different nuances, because it's really not 4-4. It's 1, 8, 7, and 2, 6, depending on what issue. No, I'm actually being very serious
No,
about what
I
I
would encourage,
think
the
can be.
4 of you, if you want to send out something that says, as 4 members, this is what we think, I would communicate with the legislature what my opinions are.
Yeah, I mean,
I have, and I will continue to do so. I'm
I'd
not
just like
worried
to
about that.
say, oh, I'm sorry.
The only issue I was trying to raise was whether or not our inability, so what does our inability to come to a decision allow or not allow the department to do, is the issue I'm trying to raise, right? So Mike and Lisa are in conversation with the governor's office, legislators and the like about this. Are they empowered to go wherever, given that we were unable to reach agreement? Are they empowered to go nowhere?
Can I ask a question? If we said,
And my position, just to finish my thought, is that they're empowered to go wherever, using their professional judgment. We've provided them no guidance, literally none.
Well, I would qualify this, and this has been even said by John, because he's here, I can't, but even John has acknowledged that Lisa carries out board issues. I'm very clear to carry out when I express myself to say, this is not a board position. But I reserve the right as state superintendent, and have done so, to express my own opinion on things. I think I'm not stupid, so if you've noticed, I'm not radically out there so far.
No, and
But
I didn't mean to
I've even
suggest
had
that. I
I've even had a
apologize. I did
history
not-
of 30 years where there's issues I feel strongly about, and suddenly it's not that I wouldn't weigh in if asked. But I would say more clearly that Lisa is very much under the guidance of the board on this stuff when we have a position. But I think Dan's point's right. Right now, I don't think we can clarify it at 4:30. I think we'll just have to take John, appreciate his way of describing it, that we'll have kind of a sense. We'll do the best we can. Right now, if I had to give any direction to Lisa, it would be just be kind of silent, because I'd be afraid until we debrief later today or tomorrow to get a clear sense that we're not stepping on someone's toes. But I think you would use, as you've kind of inferred your own, as you've done even up till now, your own good relationships to express your views. I do think if we were to get some requests tomorrow based on what I'm not clear on the policy. It was a series of notes, but if we try to debrief and understand what you voted on today on the individual actions, individual communications, this could be one of those examples that there's different individual communications that go out under letterhead. I'm not sure that's in our interest, but
We won't bombard you on day one.
Could I just say that for the last 5 years, probably, we have really come to consensus on things. And it's really been great, and there's been a lot of movement on things, but I think on this topic, we do have some very clear differences. And I, for one, trust Lisa to portray things in that vein. And maybe it's the first time that we're dealing on that level, but sometimes we have to set a precedent for things.
I mean, tomorrow, the two news services at the end of the table will already make it clear to the legislature, no matter what Lisa does, their version of what happened today. So,
Right, well, that-
and I think it'll neutralize any particular impact, that
Yeah.
maybe
That does
it is
scare
what it
me.
is. And then they'll proceed,
So I just want to confirm that if we were to make a statement that we don't support lifting the cap, but if you were to move forward with that, these are the things we would want, would there be majority support for that?
Well, regardless of whether they move forward or not, this is what I find so amazing. This whole letter was about what had to happen, not what had not to happen. And the fact that this board is taking a negative approach about what I can't support, I think it's time we take a positive approach. Not that I'm asking you to support something you don't want to, but I think it's time we say what we can support. And I think I thought I heard what we could support is, I thought people could have supported transparency. I thought they could have support accountability. I thought they could support making certain that charter boards had control of their own lives and that they were able to truly and honestly select whether or not they wanted a management company or to do it themselves or to have it internally done. I thought we could support dual enrollment, and I thought we could support innovation that was both shared and internalized within the organizational practice. And I'm just surprised that somehow all that's linked to the cap being lifted or not. If you threw that out...
So that's, I mean, I'm just...
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out... I
As
don't
chair
know.
more, I would say now with John gone, I'm
Yeah,
not sure
it's
there's
all right.
anything
I'm
more
sorry.
we do today.
I'm sorry. Never mind.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Right. But I we'll learn from this. I mean, there's probably, I think, good earnest thought on a lot of people's part to try to come to an agreement, and it didn't happen this time, that's all. I think this shouldn't dissuade the committee from still working through it as best they can, and maybe there's a lesson here a little earlier on about what the major objections would be so that we could try to iron them out in a legislative committee meeting. But that's easier said than done. I mean, you need to see a final paper, so no criticism on my part. It is what it is for now, and we're not always going to have consensus on something. Okay?
I
So I
think
think-
we've got a pretty good record up to now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
One piece of consensus I wasn't expecting, but life goes on. Is there any other...
Well, I had...
What's that?
Consensus on adjournment, I bet we can
Well,
adjourn.
Yeah,
We
right.
can do that.
Well, maybe we could agree, but I had something I wanted to bring up. And it's something that we've discussed the last couple
For
of
years.
years in the sort of teacher side. But in view of the fact that evaluations are going to be done on effective teachers and tenure and all that is based, at this point, 45% on the standardized test, and it's going to be at least 50% in a couple of years. I think we ought to have a review of whether the timing of the tests is still what we think it should be. And I think we should, if we could get a presentation on...
Well, I think we address this by saying in 14, when we have Smarter Balance, that will be flipped. And why would we do that prior to that time? It's going to be, I
So
have
we
that
wouldn't
right.
change it before 14?
Well, it cost, we'd have to do it again then. I mean, I just thought we agreed when we presented that here at the table that, okay, at least it's in the pipeline and we'll flip back. This one right now, for example, today, and I don't mean disrespect, but you can't just keep saying, for example, just because of public participation, that we don't get the MEP scores out till the spring. We get the MEP scores out by mid-December, period. I don't know how many times we have to say this. Not to you guys, to some folks that keep misaligning our work. The reason I'm somewhat sensitive to that is you wouldn't believe what our guys have to go through to do that. And they do it with the idea of getting back to classroom teachers, within 2 months, feedback on the tests today, the MEP series and others. And then there's a point where, but I guess if your question is, could we in 13 possibly flip and then flip again? I mean, I don't even know.
Well, I don't know
how
what
to-
we would have to flip again. I mean, we don't know when the Smarter Balance test would be given in the fall or in the spring.
They'll be given in the spring, and what we don't know yet, because the feds haven't ruled on it, if we're going to have to give both assessments for a couple of years because we won't have growth data because there'll be new assessments. So there's a whole lot of details to work out.
Yeah, I think we're on the track, and I think it'll be what everyone's hoping for, and it'll be one big package with a much more appropriate and growth-oriented system. Because even when we say standardized tests, I'm trying to catch myself saying based on growth, so that people...
Right, I don't disagree with that, but I was thinking that the tests are going to be really based on the last year's teachers, not...
Well, no, under that, there would be minimum of 3 points in a year that folks would have an opportunity to see progress under Smarter Balance. So that you'd see, in effect, a beginning, a middle, and an end. I think it's at least 3 points. And the good part about being part of this $300 million consortium is we couldn't have possibly done this on our own. And there's some value in the consensus that will be built by experts from 30-some states as opposed to us alone, and dealing with a lot of the same national issues like that one, evaluation on growth, not an unfair one-time test that, we shouldn't and can't hold people responsible for. But you can on growth over time. And I think that's what this will allow. Yes, Dan?
2 things. Just one, I just want to clarify, get clarification around something that Sally just said. So there is no chance, right, that the MEP would be administered in the fall and then the new assessment 1 or 2 other times in the year. Is that what you were suggesting?
What we don't know yet is that first year when we switch to the assessment, so let's say the new MEP, the Smarter Balance elementary test would be given in the spring. And so we'll have to make a decision and work with the feds. And it's not just going to be Michigan, it's going to be all the states. Do you give your existing state assessment concurrently, because once you give the new assessment, you won't be able to do growth? And so the question is there going to be a year of transition where you give your state assessments for 2 more years, so you get at least 2 years of growth data on the new assessments? And that's what our staff working on with the team.
Growth data year over year, not from fall to spring.
Oh, right.
Right? Okay. So from fall to spring will be measured by the new assessment, right, which will have multiple points of administration over the course of the year.
Other than transition time. That's
right.
Okay.
So just to be clear, so I don't actually think that issue is responsive to the one that Kathleen raises. We could administer the MEP in the spring and the Smarter Balance whenever during the year and still be able to measure growth in that way. I think that, so I will just go on record as saying that I really do want us to have a conversation about this, given the way this exam is being used now to tie back to teacher performance. I have real concerns about an October administered exam being used to measure the performance of a teacher, given the existence of summer learning loss. It just doesn't make sense to me. And so one or the other it seems to me during this interim period has to change. Either the exam has to be moved to the spring, or we've got to say we won't use it until we have a springtime exam to actually tie back to teacher performance.
Yeah,
That's
it's an issue.
my
We should-
concern.
we
Not
could-
to be addressed today, obviously,
No.
but I do just think that we need a conversation about the day, the timing of the exam, just to get that kind of thing out on the table and figure out what, if anything, can be done around it.
I hear your point. I would say what also informs your point is the lack of clarity that we even have about the council and the educator effectiveness timing and what that really has on implications. I think all that is kind of inferring that this is a little bit down the road yet anyway. I mean, they're the ones that are defaulting to their own test because they got it in time, I'm not sure what they're doing. But for the rest who are going to take the model, the council's not even done till the spring. And then there's a
And there still has to be legislation.
legislation after that. So even though, what I'm
They
getting
might
at,
not
even though
be
there's
aware of this
legislation on
issue.
growth for evaluation, the practicality of it is it's down the road.
I mean, it's even more complicated because in the ESA flexibility package, they've built in that you have a pilot year. We don't have it with our legislation. We don't have a pilot year in. Now, could we maybe convince them to do that because it would be nice to pilot something? I don't know if they'd be willing to do that, but now that this whole flexibility thing, it's kind of changed the ground for us.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we?
I think it's legit, and I think there are probably more issues like this to be surfaced, and ultimately it could result in a recommendation from the department to whomever about the way this should roll out, so that we don't run into problems of the kind that we're starting to identify now.
Yeah.
Because chances are the members of that advisory council don't know anything about the testing schedule and what teaches it measures. And, you know, they're not educators, a lot of them.
No, the 5 are.
They're-
The 5
Well,
are.
some
The
of
other
them-
10, the
Oh.
10 are more
They
taken
are
into account.
very well versed in this stuff.
Yeah, so the 5 on the council are, but I think, you know, the 10 that are kind of advising the council, you know,
Oh.
PTA president statewide is a,
Okay.
you know, reps of
But I-
different, Dave Hecker.
Anyway, I thought it an issue that we should know more about.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
let's give it some thought ourselves, and to the degree that the points you're raising, these intersections create a collision, we'll bring it back. I think it resolves itself, but we'll have to, when we're, I'll speak for myself, when we're less muddled, we'll try to get clarity in our own mind. And if necessary, at the next meeting, try to clarify it for the board. In fact, let's just do that. Let's just commit that we'll try to be clear about why we think that either isn't a problem, or if it is, the possible change in dates. Okay?
Thank you.
We're good? Okay.
Okay.